Chapter 844 Leaving the demon's grave in the ash field, Michael watched the Sky Hall soldiers dig up more and more caskets from the ground. Unfortunately, Vidora's body eluded his X-ray vision altogether. The body was far too deep in the ground. If Andor hadn't given Sky Hall the exact coordinates, they wouldn't have unearthed Vidora's body in a million years. He knew everything that happened to the past Dark Lord, so Andor was able to exploit his mistakes. Having no idea Vidora's adult body was in the ground, Michael patiently watched the Sky Hall dig up more caskets. He lingered above the dig site for almost an hour, and all the soldiers did was dig. "I don't see a point hanging out here any longer," said Kane. Michael didn't wait for others to agree. Instead, he turned around and flew away from the place. After seeing the mural on top of the mother tree, Michael decided to leave Destinies and the demon's grave. Initially, he planned to spend a few more days helping the wood elves, but he changed his plans. He thrilled himself to achieve full speed, leaving a dark lightning streak in the sky. Vidora tightened their tail around Michael's neck as they never experienced such high speed. It took them 2 hours to reach the ash field from the mother tree earlier. However, the return trip only took 45 minutes. When Michael pushed himself to the brink, several tiny lightning bolts appeared and crackled around his body. To Vidora's surprise, Michael didn't go to the tribe but came to the mother tree. He landed right before the stone pillar, creating a shock wave around the tree. "Why are we back here?" asked Sarba. Boom! Michael punched the stone pillar as it exploded into bits and pieces. All it took was one punch from Michael to erase his past self's mistakes. Honestly, Michael didn't think the past Dark Lord had made a mistake by killing Vidora. Although Michael didn't know the reason, he knew how hard it would have been for the past Dark Lord to kill Vidora. But no matter what, he wouldn't let history repeat itself, and he broke the pillar as a gesture of his promise to Vidora. Our past is meant to guide us, not define us. We must not give out past the power to dictate our future. Michael looked at his shoulder where Vidora was looking at the pebbles on the ground and said. They slowly flapped their wings to see Michael in the eyes. "He is right," started Sarba. "The past Dark Lord left this behind because he wanted us to see it and change our future. That's what I've been trying to tell you both." Kane rolled his eyes. Usually, Kane remained silent until his response was absolutely needed. However, when his siblings tried to grow a hatred toward Ghost, he immediately came out of his shell and tried to talk some sense into them. Sarba and Kane turned their gazes toward Iag. "I am not mad at Ghost, idiots. I am just confused why they fought each other to death," said Iag. "Whatever the reason might have been, we do not need to dwell on it," said Michael. "Can we just stay here for a moment before we go back to the tribe?" Sarba looked worried as Michael nodded and went to the mother's tree's edge. He sat down and put Vidora beside him. The two of them looked at the magical world before them in peace. As they drowned themselves in the beautiful sight, Vidora slowly approached Michael and jumped on his lap. Then, the three heads snuggled against Michael's stomach and tried to embrace him with their small wings. "You are family, Ghost. We would never hurt you, and we know you wouldn't too." Iag's eyes became watery as Michael rubbed their back gently. Michael was about to open his mouth when he saw the silhouette of the past Dark Lord in the sky. It only lasted in the sky for a mere moment, and Michael could swear he saw the past Dark Lord smile at them before disappearing. At that moment, Michael felt something changing inside him, like something heavy had been lifted off of him. The more Michael learned about the past Dark Lord, the more he understood why he decided to reset the entire universe. At first, it felt a bit extreme to Michael, but he sympathized with him after learning about the dark parts of his life. If he had lost Gaia and been forced to kill Vidora for some reason, he would reset the universe too. He wouldn't let that happen, no matter what. The two of them spent almost an hour on the mother tree before returning to the tribe. As usual, the wood elves greeted him with bright smiles and cooked meat since Taskin and the others could hunt efficiently using the crossbows. I hope you had a pleasant journey, my lord, Karat said as Michael sat on his throne. For a few moments, Michael didn't answer Karat. My lord, Karat called Michael again. He looked drowned in his own thoughts to Karat. What did you say? Michael asked, snapping back to reality. Is everything all right, my lord? Asked Karat. Thilv couldn't help overhearing Karat and approached the two of them while Taskin was helping the other crossbow bearers perfect their aims. It will be soon, said Michael. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Michael took out the copper ring and the silver coin he snatched from the panther. Like a magnet pulling the iron closer, the copper ring pulled the silver coin almost instantly. Ding! The silver coin hit the copper coin. Michael felt the copper ring frantically vibrate as the silver coin radiated a dim glow. Soon, the silver coin glowed as bright as a torch, making the wood elves around Michael close their eyes. Suddenly, the light shot straight above Michael and opened up a vortex in the air. Michael was surprised to see the coin open up a portal in a blink of an eye. He thought he would have to ask the system or do some work to activate the copper ring. But on the contrary, the copper ring opened up a portal using the coin. How the coin was able to open up a portal was still a mystery to Michael, but he was glad it did. Seeing the weird swirling hole in the air, the wood elves gasped. When the Dark Lord first appeared in their world, Karat saw a portal just like this portal before. In fact, Karat saw the Dark Lord fly through this portal. Hence, his heart sank when he saw another one appear above them. The old man knew their god was about to leave their world. Michael took a step forward and placed his hand on Karat's shoulder. I am not abandoning you all. I will be back soon, but my lord, can't you stay with us a bit longer? Thilv panicked as Taskin dropped what he was doing and came to stand beside his wife. My lord, is there something we can do to change your mind? Asked Taskin, only to see Michael shake his head. There is something I must do in my world. As I promised before, I will build a portal connecting this world to mine. I can't do that from here. The wood elves looked gloomy, and some even cried. However, they knew they couldn't change Michael's decision even though they wanted to. Can we come with you, my lord? Taskin stunned everyone with his question. As much as I like for all of you to come into my world, I cannot take anyone with me at this moment. Michael slowly shook his head. He stepped back and raised his head to see the swirling vortex. As his feet ascended from the floor, the wood elves dropped to their knees one by one. Many, including children, sobbed to see the Dark Lord leave their world. Please come back soon, my lord, Karat's voice stuttered. He was on the verge of crying out loud. Lady Iag, don't forget what you promised us, one of the elven girls purred as Iag nodded with a smile. I want. And you people better be safe and sound when we come back. Otherwise, you will have hell to pay, Sarba shouted as tears rolled out his eyes. But they were not tears of sadness. On the contrary, Sarba was happy that they would be able to visit their world soon. Granted, both Vidora and Michael wanted to spend more time in Idenies as there was so much more to explore in the world, yet they had no choice. To Michael, his journey through the demon's grave and Itnois seemed cut short by an invisible force. Nonetheless, it was his choice to leave and build a portal back into the castle. Now that he had gathered everything he wanted from Idenies, the Dark Army's financial problem would soon be history. On the bright side, Michael couldn't wait to see Gaia and Nightmare and tell them everything that had transpired. When Michael was just a few inches away from the vortex, Michael took out a modified earpiece and mirror from the system storage. He had to convert all the 10 million gold coins into badass points to modify them. It was worth the price, though. The earpiece and the tablet-sized mirror floated toward Karat. You can use them to contact me if there is an emergency. Michael emphasized the word emergency because he knew the wood elves would call him every day otherwise. We will meet you soon, these were Michael's words to them before he disappeared into the vortex. Meanwhile, Andor felt the vortex open in Idenies using the artifact he gave the Beastmen tribe a long time ago. The The coin Michael used to create the vortex was made by none other than the god of time and space himself. So naturally, Andor felt it when Michael used the coin. Andor creased his dark brows sitting on the throne. So one of those idiots managed to lose one to my nemesis. Andor clenched his fist. This act of foolishness alone was enough for Andor to wipe out the Beastmen kingdom. Luckily for them, he had more pressing matters on hand, like reanimating Vidora's body. Chapter 845 Fourth Armor Piece. I don't care what the fuck you do, but I want him found yesterday. You understand? I am this close to murdering all the guardians I can find. Gaia stomped the ground. She stood in the surveillance room in the dark forest and contacted all the subordinates at the same time, except Saber and Adelia. If he is in the southern continent, I will find him, said Tiberius. My girls are doing everything they can, my lady, Sadie started, only to get interjected by Gaia. It's not enough. I won't meet Ghost empty-handed. That fucker Noah destroyed both the prototype and the weapon. Even the blueprints are gone. So the only way to turn this into a win is to find the man behind this weapon. Gaia was not playing around. If the subordinates were to meet her in person, there would be casualties in the castle. She was pissed at everyone, including herself. Thanks to Noah and his team, she lost the prototype, weapon, and the man who built it. Like a cherry on top of a failure cake, Noah captured the orcs who survived the auction, including the leader, and brought them somewhere Gaia couldn't find. Even Lord Information didn't know anything about the orcs except they supposedly worked for the Beast King. What about the Guardian you flipped recently? If I heard you right, he is in Noah's elite unit. So how in the hell he has no idea about the inverter's location? Gaia creased her brows. Everyone went silent, expecting Sadie's answer. By turning a guardian into their spy, Sadie outperformed everyone in the room. Even the Dark Queen praised her, which wouldn't happen so often. Through their new spy, they learned the locations of the Guardian safe houses and how Noah operated in each kingdom. However, even Noah's elites didn't know where he kept Hammond. He has no idea, my lady. It seems like Noah doesn't trust his own people enough to disclose the location. We might have a chance if we track down the Hontorum dwarves, Sadie suggested. Do you think I don't know that? The vamps are searching for them as we speak. But those bearded dodo ducks are good at hiding. After Noah's little fiasco, they went dark. If they were good at something besides building, it's hiding, the subordinates nodded in agreement. After a few more minutes of roasting all the subordinates, Gaia dismissed them. When they were ordered to leave, they all heaved a sigh of relief. To them, the Dark Queen was more terrifying than the Dark Lord himself when she was angry. They could reason with the Dark Lord, who always remains calm and collected. But in stark contrast, no one could utter a word when the Dark Queen was pissed. At that time, the only way to survive her wrath was to keep their mouths shut and agree to everything she said. My lady, Azazel appeared beside Gaia after the mirrors went dark. What does he want? Asked Gaia without turning around to look Azazel in the eyes. Her full focus was on how to find the man who was responsible for building those weapons. Lord Saber says he has an update on the fourth armor piece. As soon as Gaia heard these words, she immediately turned her head toward Azazel. Finally, some fucking good news. Put him through. Soon, Saber's face appeared in the mirror as though all the mirrors had emerged together to form a gigantic face. Judging by the ocean around Saber, Gaia could tell he was on a ship. She also noticed Shorty running around, so she guessed he was in Big Bertha. My lady, Saber slightly bowed. Tell me what you found about the armor piece. Gaia didn't ask any useless questions like how are you or how is the journey. Instead, she went straight to the point. It's in the southern continent, my lady. To be precise, it's in Myril. The man I interrogated told me his family helped bring in 2 crates of ancient artifacts to the southern continent. Apparently, the one who hired him found these artifacts buried somewhere in the Azure continent, said Saber. What makes you think these artifacts are the Dark Lord's armor? Gay rubbed her chin in doubt. Nothing Saber said had actually pointed her to think these artifacts belonged to the Dark Lord. This man's ancestor who brought these artifacts to the southern continent has left behind a ship manifest. In that list, he has written unknown metal pieces that attract lightning. His exact words were metal parts that attract crimson-red lightning bolts. Gaia raised her brows as she realized why Saber had come to the conclusion that he did. However, she still had another question to ask. This man you interrogated, how did you find him? Asked Gaia. There was no chance for Saber to stumble upon a man who knew about the Dark Lord's armor piece. The past Dark Lord went to lengths to hide these pieces and ensured only Michael could find them. Granted, one of the armor pieces was found in ruin by others and almost auctioned out to a war god, but it was just a 1 in a million occurrence. She doubted another one of the pieces might have been found by a human. Because he tried to sell this in the Aqua Palace, Saber slowly raised a broken piece of metal with a skull engraved. That is. Gaia's voice trailed off as her jaw dropped slightly. That skull in the metal piece was, without a doubt, the symbol of the Dark Lord. There was no doubt in her mind. If that wasn't enough, tiny bolts of crimson-red lightning danced around the metal piece in Saber's hand. One of my people was lucky to intercept the sale and inform me, said Saber. It seems awfully legit to me. What about you, Azazel? Gaia asked the demon butler. He focused his gaze on the metal piece. We certainly cannot neglect the possibility that this piece belongs to the Dark Lord's armor piece. Gaia nodded. Have you learned where these artifacts are in the southern continent? Saber took a long deep breath before answering Gaia. About that, my lady. I have good and bad news. Start with good news. I've been getting more and more bad news lately, Gaia sighed. She thought it'd be too easy for them to get the armor piece without going through some kind of trial. It was like the Dark Lord anticipated everything and designed the trials for them. They had found 3 armor pieces so far, and each of them came at a price. Well, the good news is I've tracked down who owns these artifacts, the Salinators. One of the powerful families in Kingdom Immortal. Then what is the bad news? I assume it has something to do with why you can't go there and retrieve the armor pieces by any means necessary, said Gaia as Saber nodded. The heir of Salinators, Matilia Salinator, is married to General Quintus. As soon as Gaia heard the name Quintus, a light bulb lit inside her head. In all the chaos, she forgot about Quintus and Kingdom Myral's aggressive expansion. Thanks to Kane's surprisingly masterful tactics, they were able to stop Myral from waging wars on other kingdoms. Moreover, Quintus went dark after Michael killed Fabia Viridis. They hadn't seen Quintus since she turned him into a super soldier using vampire strains. Without General Quintus, the Kingdom Myral completely ceased all its hostile activities. After Giselle and Maven merged together, they became a powerful kingdom itself, while Tiberius found his own kingdom, the Freedom Land, although he hadn't announced his land as a new kingdom yet. That left Priorid and the Trident of the Southern Continent Kivin, Zoral, and Netis aka the kingdoms ruled by kings instead of senates. The last time Gaia heard from Caius, Kingdom Myral, and Kingdom Priorid was in peace talks. For some reason, Kane wanted the peace talks between them to drag on instead of coming to a solution. If he had thought, he could have ordered Arya to assassinate the senators of Myral and bring an end to the Cold War, yet he chose not to. I did some digging and found when Quintus married Matilia, the Salinator family gifted Quintus with priceless valuables and artifacts, and you think these artifacts include the Dark Lord's armor piece? Gaia tilted her head. Yes, Saber frowned. Judging by the dark lines on his forehead, Gaia guessed they couldn't simply go to Quintus' home and take the armor piece by force. Tell me what the problem is, asked Gaia. Matilia is a regular customer to a noble bathhouse where one of Sadie's girls is working. To the rest of Myral, Quintus has taken personal time, but according to his wife, he disappeared along with many of the family artifacts. I broke into their home and went through all their wealth but found no armor piece, which means Quintus has the armor piece, Gaia finished Saber's sentence. Are you sure, Saber? Gaia asked. This is the only lead we have, my lady. I'd say we should chase it down. Gaia took a few long moments to think about this. By destroying the prototype and the weapon right under her nose, Noah caused a huge blow to her mindset. She started to second-guess everything she had planned, which was very unlikely of her. It didn't only affect her but also everyone in the Dark Army. Go ahead, but if you sense something is amiss, get out of there immediately. We cannot deny the possibility this might be an elaborate trap designed by that son of a bitch. Noah, don't worry about me, my lady. I lived long enough to outsmart a human, Saber snickered as Gaia slowly shook her head. Do not underestimate Noah. I underestimated him, and as a result, I have failed the Dark Lord. Saber was actually surprised to see the graveness in her voice. To be honest, he had never seen her like this. I will take your advice to my heart, my lady. Now with your permission, I'd like to dismiss myself, talk to Tiberius. He was tracking down Quintus, and he might have an idea about Quintus' location, said Gaia. Chapter 846. Back on the bed with Gaia, the storm was raging around the floating mountain in the dark ocean. As the storm grew more violent and powerful, the wind blew past strong enough to pick up a man and fling him to the briny waves. Several tornadoes formed in the sea and slowly moved toward the mountain. The superiorly thick smoky clouds rolled in like boulders, ready to crush anything in their way above the dark castle. The darkness was engulfing and seemed to consume any speck of light entirely. Any last hope was gone. The merciless winds caused the enormous waves to rise like giant sea monsters. These waves almost touched the very bottom of the floating mountain. Every wave erupted like a raging volcano. The lightning storm joined the party and decorated the sky with streaks of lightning. Except for the vampire guards who were tasked to patrol the floating mountain, everyone else took shelter inside the castle. While the storm was raging outside, Gaia sat beside the window and watched the storm outside. She tightly held a cup of hot coffee Raylene had made her. Without Nightmare and Michael, she felt lonely. For some reason, Nightmare chose to fly through the tornadoes to hone his flying skills. But she knew he just came up with an excuse to spend some time alone. It wouldn't take a genius to tell Nightmare missed Claire and the Sunrise sect. He didn't miss them much when Vidora was there to keep him company. Since Vidora left for the demon's grave with Michael, they both felt lonely. She didn't blink as she stared at the storm through the foggy window. Her fingers moved toward the window without her control, writing the name Michael on the glass. Soon, the words disappeared in the fog as she leaned on the window. Like a bird flying out of its nest, her thoughts flew away from the room. The temperature within the hot coffee dropped by several degrees and started to turn cold coffee. Ever since she lost the prototype and the weapon after so much preparation and planning, she lost her appetite. During the last couple of days, Raylene became another mother to Gaia. She made sure Gaia's been eating and drinking well despite her lack of appetite. When Gaia refused to eat, Rayle would just knock on her head like an angry mother and feed her with her hands as she did to Cindy and Rummy. Looking at the dancing tornadoes, Gaia's consciousness drifted away as her eyes slowly closed. When her head fell, she became wary and emptied the warm coffee in a single gulp. Then, she strolled toward the neatly made bed and just collapsed on the bed like a lifeless body. Both her body and mind were exhausted to the point that as soon as she hit the bed, she entered into a dreamless sleep. The rain droplets played drums upon hitting the windows and the roof, playing a lullaby like a loving mother. As she was on the verge of completely losing sentience, she felt a hand around her waist. Gaia thought it was a dream as the embrace felt like it came from Michael. He used to hug her tight while sleeping. Every fiber in her body wanted the warmth to last longer and did not want this dream to end. Then, the hand around her waist tightened its hold, pulling her closer toward a gentle warmth. It felt too real to be a dream. She abruptly opened her eyes as her body was about to jolt out of bed. But her body froze the moment she saw Michael's face. Michael gently brushed the strand of hair falling on her face. On the other hand, Gaia looked as though his shocking return petrified her. She was speechless. "Is this real?" Gaia muttered. "You tell me," Michael said, slowly moving his head closer to hers. She could feel his warm breath breezing past her like a morning breeze. When she opened her mouth, he closed it with his own lips. Their bodies pressed together heatedly against each other, breathing heavily as they tasted each other's lips. Everything around Gaia blurred and silenced. The only sound she heard was the sound of his hands gently cupping her face to position her face for a heavenly kiss. They only departed when they lost their breath. "When did you come back?" asked Gaia. Her alluring eyes sparkled with joy at seeing Michael. It was too much of a shock to her. "Just a few minutes ago. The moment I stepped into this world, I came running to see the most beautiful girl in the entire universe." Michael pinched Gaia's nose playfully. "I see the demon's grave has turned you cheesy," Gaia purred. She threw her arm around Michael's shoulder and tried to pull him closer, although there was no space between them. "Where is Vidora?" Gaia asked. "They went to see Raylene. I think we should talk about why I sense some gloom in your eyes. Something happened." Despite how happy she looked, Michael could see through her eyes and read her like a book. After entering the portal, he appeared somewhere in the crystal ocean that divides Elon and Azair. From there, he used runic teleportation to reach the castle. So he didn't know what had happened while he was gone. As she heard him, she moved closer and rested her head on his chest. "I fucked up," Gaia said in a husky voice. Then, Gaia began to tell Michael what had happened since he left for the demon's grave. When she finally finished her story, Michael surprised her with a chuckle. "You idiot. That was the reason why you look so gloomy." Michael rubbed her head as she looked at him with shock and surprise. To be honest, she never expected Michael to take her failure so casually, like it didn't matter. "I failed you," Gaia purred. Once again, Michael ruffled her head. He liked to ruffle her perfectly combed hair and kiss the top of her head. Although he was not the most romantic man in the world, he never passed on an opportunity to pamper her and shower her with kisses. "Nothing you ever do will fail or disappoint me, you silly idiot. What if Noah destroyed the prototype and the weapon? You did everything you could, but... Gaia muttered as Michael shook his head. "No buts." "Listen," Michael lifted up Gaia and put her body on him. He then cupped her face and looked her in the eyes. "If I fail to do something, would you be disappointed in me?" Gaia shook her head. "Of course, I will kill you if you don't marry me or look at another girl. But I won't feel disappointed." Gaia punched Michael in the chest. Despite her words, he never doubted Michael, not even for a second. She trusted him enough to leave Michael with thousands of beauties in a room without a worry in the world. The trust they had in each other was stronger than anything in the world. They both knew a relationship couldn't survive without trust. Her words made Michael chuckle. "See? That's how I feel. Whatever you do or don't, you will never disappoint me. Besides, why are you looking at the events as failures? You and I both know it was Noah who destroyed the weapon along with the Hontorum shipyard. We can use it to turn the dwarves against the guardians. They pretended to be elves, so I'd say the elves won't be happy about their names being dragged through the mud. So we can give the elves and the dwarves a common enemy," said Michael. He came up with the plan on the spot, and as simple as it may sound, the plan would bring major heat upon the Guardian Guild once he provided proof about Noah's involvement to both dwarves and the elves. Now that Gaia said they turned a guardian into their spy, it would be relatively easier for him to gather the needed proof to make Noah's life harder. Noah may have gained the upper hand in the new weapon matter, but Michael would soon pay him back several folds. I've returned from the most dangerous places in the world. Can you put aside these matters and give me some love? Michael winked. Only kisses for you, my darling, said Gaia in a playful tone. Until you marry me, why did I agree to that? I have the most beautiful sexy girl as my fiancée, and I don't get to do more. Michael pretended to be disappointed. As far as Michael was concerned, relationships were more than having physical satisfaction. He didn't think Gaia would say no if he insisted, but Michael respected her wish not to have anything physical more than a kiss. He was quite happy with that because she was the one for him. This was a magical relationship Michael would treasure forever. Every time he looked into her eyes, he promised himself not to let anything happen to her. The Dark Lord was right to reset the entire universe. If something were to happen to Gaia, Michael would go to hell or heaven to bring her back, no matter the cost. Even the Dark Lord has to obey his woman, Michael, Gaia chuckled. Inside these walls, I am the boss, is that so? Michael grabbed her by her slender waist, pushed her to the side, and got on top of her. He held her wrists firmly. Bastard, don't even think about it, Gaia squirmed. I am not thinking about anything, Michael said with a foxy smile. The following hours were spent cuddling and kissing. They talked for hours until they both fell asleep under the cozy blanket. Chapter 847 Selisi, the Queen of Nagaland. A few days ago, in a spacious hall with a ceiling 20 feet high, designs of fruit and flowers were carved into the molding, and small, fat children with wings looked down at the marble floor from every angle. Vases of blossoms gave off a cloying scent that made my eyes itch. The hall had a square oak table in the center with numerous comfy chairs to sit in. Since there were no windows, sun rays could peek into the room. Instead, a magnificent chandelier hung above the oak table, brightening the hall with its golden light. The dark brown walls made of wood perfectly complemented the marble floor, though one would think the combination wouldn't work. The only way to get in or out of the hall was the steel door with countless runes engraved in it. Seconds became minutes, and minutes turned an hour when the door finally creaked open. Zenali stepped into the hall and strolled toward the table. They'll be here soon, Mother, Zenali pulled out a chair and said, looking at the door. Then, a tall, graceful woman dressed in majestic red robes. Her hourglass figure sat well on her wafer-thin body. She had a complexion of an impeccable golden hue. Her pencil-thin eyebrows eased down gently to her black, beetle's-leg eyelashes. A sculptor could not have better fashioned her seraph's ears and pixie's nose. Filed to perfection, her rose-red fingernails ran through her fiery red hair. Spools of it plunged around her photogenic face and hit a swan's neck, elegant and smooth. This woman was born to draw attention toward her, and it was hard not to look and give her full attention. When she opened her mouth to answer Zenali, her beguiling, oyster-white teeth lit up the room. She was the ruler of Nagaland and Zanla's mother, Selisi Hearthill. Even after marrying the king of Nagaland, she kept her last name without changing it as any woman would have. Once Selisi settled down, people began to enter the hall one by one through the door. At first, some elves arrived, then some dwarves, orcs, and humans. At last, a group of orcs with books the size of a newborn baby entered the hall and took their seats before the table. After the Nagas filled the rest of the empty seats, Selisi finally rose from her chair to address the 60 or so people in the hall. They all stopped muttering amongst themselves and turned their gazes toward her. Victoria and Evan sat with the humans in the crowd, holding hands under the table. First of all, I thank all of you for answering the summons and coming here, said Selisi in her captivating voice that fits for a ruler. We are gathered here to make an important step in history to protect our world from all the evil there is and will be. Selisi started her speech in a calm manner. The great 8 clans used to protect the world and us. But the reason you've all here is that you and I both feel the same. They've failed us. They forgot the very reason why they were created in the first place. Corruption has rooted in them to the core. If we want our future generations to thrive and prosper, we as their elders have to come together and do what must be done." Selisi paused and looked at her audience. "We must be the shield that protects our world from evil and darkness." Selisi slightly raised her voice. "We must be the light bringers in the shadow." Her words echoed through the hall. "We must fight for the future of this world for our children." Everyone had a tiny spark in their eyes after hearing her thundering words. Each of them in the hall was hand-picked by Selisi herself. The most important thing Selisi looked at in them was their patriotism and the thirst to protect the world. If one was to dig more about each individual, they could find that these people either witnessed the Dark Lord's wrath in person or were kicked out of their clan for doing what the others deemed a violation of clan rule. But if they hadn't violated the rule, many would have died or failed to get the justice they deserved. For instance, Evan left the Guardian Guild after witnessing Ghost obliterate the entire Ithilien Island, and the Barnes family what he witnessed that day and how weak he felt affected him mentally. For almost a year, Evan fought the traumatic experience and took the path to self-destruction. At one point, he wanted to kill himself so he could stop hearing all the cries for help. As a godsend, he had Victoria and Zenali. Evan would have been inside a casket 6 feet deep if it weren't for them. After finally stabilizing his mental health, Evan decided to stop running from his fear and fight it head-on, and his fear was just a man, the Dark Lord. So when Zenali told him about Sales's plan to fight the Dark Lord, he agreed without a second question. Just like Evan, every single one in the hall had a story. Some were affected by the Dark Lord's actions in one way or another, while some had a strong moral sense to fight evil and protect the world. Since all the Great 8 clans made sure the biggest evil in the world was the Dark Lord, they naturally felt inclined to fight the Dark Lord. Instead of giving a long speech about who I intend to fight, hopefully with your support, I will show you what he was capable of and what he will do to us if we do not fight. Selisi flicked her wrist as a cube materialized on the table's center. A dim light shot out of the cube and formed the image of an island. The images changed from uniquely built buildings to people laughing with their children on the streets. Those who realized where these images were taken clenched their fist and prepared them mentally. Almost everyone knew what was about to happen except for the orcs, who lived most of their lives in seclusion. Then, as they guessed, the beautiful island became a battlefield. The people saw everything they admired burning as dead bodies littered the ground. One by one, the images showed how brutal the last couple of days were for Ithilien. Thousands of mothers lost their sons and daughters. Thousands of children lost their fathers and became orphans, and thousands lost everything they had and had to beg for refuge in the nearby kingdoms, said Selisi as the images continued to vex their minds. Only one man was responsible for all of the death and destruction, the Dark Lord. As soon as Selisi uttered the name, the entire hall went silent. But unlike most of the population, the people in the hall seemed furious rather than afraid of Michael. Some of those who lost their loved ones in Michael's war against Ithilien clenched their fists to the point their nails sank into their skin and started to bleed. As we all know, the great clans did nothing to bring him to justice. They are busy doing their politics and fixing their public image. That's one of the many reasons why I want to form a defense against the Dark Lord in the shadows. Because to fight evil such as him, we need to get our hands dirty, said Selisi as Zenali sighed inside. A year ago, if her mother proposed to build another order in secret to fight against the Dark Lord, she would have outright rejected it or tried to talk her mother out of it. But after witnessing all the death and destruction caused by the Dark Lord firsthand, Zenali learned the hard way that her moral views do not apply to him. Evan slowly raised his hand. Evan, right? Selisi turned her gaze toward Evan. He nodded and continued with his question. Let me get this straight. Are you telling us that we have to find a new clan or an order outside the Great 8 clans? Asked Evan. Our new order doesn't need to be separate from the Great 8 clans. As you may have noticed, some of you are in one of these clans. You don't have to leave your clan to fight, just like I don't have to leave my throne. What matters is we are in this together, and we must focus on one thing, putting an end to the Dark Lord's reign before it begins. In other words, you want us to be double agents. Victoria's question followed Sales's explanation. I don't want you to be anything. You are allowed to leave if you want to. I am prepared to put my life on the line to ensure my children and the future generation get to live in a world without any fear of the Dark Lord and his evil aura. The question is, will you do the same? Salisi asked Victoria. It wasn't Victoria who answered the question but Evan. I can't talk for the others, but I had enough of Ghost and his cruel reign of terror. I watched him slaughter thousands of soldiers for what? Revenge? No, Evan shook his head, he wanted to quench his thirst for blood. There was a time I said to myself, he is not that bad, Evan shrugged. Yes, he was not bad. He was evil. I saw the look on his face when he slaughtered Maxim Barnes, his wife, and his daughter. He enjoyed their pain and suffering. To this day, there are people who still suffer because of him. I, for one, will not stand aside and let him continue to terrorize the world I want my children to grow up in. So yes, I will put my life on the line and fight him to death. Evan banged the table as Salisi smiled, looking at the people around Evan who agreed with him. Despite their racial differences, everyone in the hall decided to form a vanguard against the Dark Lord. 5,000 years ago, what started as a mere group of 70 members grew into a shadow clan that rivaled the Great Eight clans. Like it or not, history had a tendency to repeat itself. Chapter 848. Not one but two. Andreas. After initiating her own order against the Dark Lord, Salisi returned to her room. Her husband, Castian Ashton, was visiting one of their cities to oversee the relief program. The city was affected by famine, and the entire Nagaland depended on the charity of the Empress. Salesis was a spacious oval room with walls the color of a burning flame. The smell of sweet gardenia candles engulfed the room. On the right side of the room was a royal red sofa set for Salisi to sit and relax, looking at the bamboo garden through the window. Although she was supposed to stay and sleep with Castian in the king's room, she chose to be in her own room. This place had become her refuge and safe haven throughout her almost 2 decades of marriage. Her bedroom only held the things that were very precious to her. She let no one inside the room, including her husband and the maids. As a matter of fact, she cleaned her room by herself instead of ordering the maids to. She decorated the walls with several portraits that reminded her of her life as the Queen of Nagaland. Almost no one knew about Salesis' life before she became the queen. Some believed she was a noble family heir, while others believed she seduced Castian after Queen Adelia's untimely death. But Salisi couldn't care less about the speculations or those who opposed her because they were still loyal to Adelia and her murdering maniac of a daughter, Gaia Ashton. Adelia closed the door behind her and walked to the window to see the serenity of the bamboo garden outside. She could connect with her inner thoughts while she was in her room. Her mind established a sense of peace as she stared at the peaceful garden outside. Whenever her life in Nagaland got tougher, which happened so often because of Gaia and Adelia's loyalists, she would come to her room and think things out thoroughly in order to make life easier. The sound of the bamboo fountain cancelled out the sounds of everything around her. As she looked at the bamboo garden, a puff of smoke came from one of the portraits depicting a village. The smoke slowly took the shape of a middle-aged man with milk-white hair. The man hovered in the air behind her, waiting for Salisi to turn around. She made him wait for a few minutes and then turned around. "Has everything gone according to our plan?" asked the man. "It went better than we expected." "You know how to pick them, Andreas." Salisi addressed the man as Andreas, the Supreme Guardian. She was not wrong, as the man before her was indeed Andreas. Just like the soul inside Noah's ring, the man before Salisi was another part of Andreas' whole soul. The only difference was the soul part in Salesis' room was much younger compared to the soul piece inside Noah's ring. "Except my disciples," Andreas sighed. "You didn't choose Noah Winston, Andreas. He was born a god, just like the Dark Lord. You chose Noah because you wanted to train Noah in the fight against the Dark Lord," said Salisi. "It seems like my other soul part is doing a bang-up job training Noah." I wouldn't be here if he wasn't, Andreas sighed. Although both Andreas derived from the same soul, they became separate beings. Besides, the Andreas with Noah was in existence longer than this Andreas. As a result, Mentor Andreas lost some memories, including the other soul pieces in existence. Don't underestimate Noah, Andreas. The Dark Lord tried to get him pickle when he said the Supreme Guardian was alive and with Noah. Everyone thought it's going to put a target on his back. But he played the situation well and turned him into a ladder to reach the Supreme Guardian position. And from what I've been hearing, he was handling everything well, Celsis praised surprised Andreas. He was with her for 2 decades, and he had never heard Celisi praise her own daughter once, let alone someone else. He just needs a little push, and that's why we are here. Aren't we? Celisi asked as Andreas nodded. Salii strolled toward the sofa with Andreas hovering beside her like a friend. He was the only one who knew the real Celisi, and she was the only person who knew of his existence. They had been collaborating for almost 2 decades. 20 years ago, Celisi and Andreas orchestrated Adelia's death to usurp the throne of Nagaland. Adelia's family, the Wraiths, was building a powerful kingdom to support the Dark Lord when he arrived in this world. They almost succeeded in their plan because before Celisi took the throne, Nagaland was powerful enough to take on the Elven Empire itself. Gaia blamed Celisi for the downfall of Nagaland, and she was right to do so. To be precise, Gaia was half right. Celsis' rule was indeed the reason for Nagaland's downfall, but what Gaia didn't know was that Celisi planned everything. Celsis' sole reason for being the queen of Nagaland was to keep Nagaland in check because the last thing the world needed was a superpower to back the Dark Lord in his war against the world. So far, Celsis' plan was going without a hiccup. Her next move was to build a shadow order to fight the Dark Lord in ways the Guardian Guild would never dare. She built an image of a kind and compassionate queen for this very moment. Everything she sacrificed and went through was finally coming together. I think he needs more than just a little push. I think we need Noah to see that the longer he ignores the Dark Lord, the more people will suffer. Power comes with responsibility. Noah needs to learn that one way or another. Andreas' voice was grave. Fortunately, he lacked a physical body and was restricted from leaving Celsis' side. Otherwise, Noah would have had 2 mentors to argue with. Noah thought his current mentor was pushing him hard toward fighting the Dark Lord, but he didn't know how bad it could have been if this Andreas had been inside Noah's ring instead. Destruction is easier than creation, Andreas. You cannot blame the guy too much. He's clearly doing his best. Why are you defending him so much, I wonder? Because you aren't. Like it or not, only Noah could kill the Dark Lord. So we should help Noah instead of criticizing him, Andreas sighed, nodding. You are right. I just hope he stops wasting time and cuts down the Dark Lord's army. We have put our plans in motion, Andreas. We will start dismantling the Dark Lord's empire piece by piece, starting from the kingdoms in the southern continent. An hour ago, the gathering went more successful than Celisi and Zenali expected. It was really surprising for them to see how many people were boiling with rage inside toward the Dark Lord. They all needed an outlet and a leader who directed this anger and utilized them against the Dark Army. When Celisi slowly filled in the void they desperately hoped to be filled, they were all easily swayed to join the order. While Celisi was addressing everyone's concerns, Zenali left the room for a moment and brought back a whiteboard with several portraits stuck to it. Many of those portraits were hand-drawn and resembled Michael. Surprisingly, some of them highlighted the Olympus around Michael's wrist. The people in the hall turned their gazes at the whiteboard and the portraits. They silently expected Celisi to explain what the hell those portraits were except the ones that had Michael's face. While most of their eyes were glued to the whiteboard, Celisi flicked her wrist as a brass spyglass finished with various intricate runes appeared on the table before her. If one looked closely at the spyglass, they could see a tiny H embossed among the runes. The H was really, but it was there, symbolizing the creator of this spyglass. To defeat the Dark Lord, we need to know both his strengths and weaknesses. Until recently, I thought he didn't have a chip in his armor. But this little thing changed my thoughts by exposing a crucial weakness. Celici paused for a moment, letting everyone boil with curiosity. Everyone leaned forward. Then, Celici slowly gave them an answer. The Dark Lord is not as strong as we thought while he was in the southern continent. Everyone was visibly shocked to hear Celici because her words contradicted what they believed. As the world knew, no one could use cultivation power within the void line. Hence, the moment someone entered the southern continent, they would become mortals. Even the immortals were not an exception. That was the reason the southern continent looked like a new world to the cultivators and why they avoided the place. Moreover, that was why Michael chose the southern continent as his home base, because in a world where no one could use energy, one who could would be the god. This spyglass was built to gauge someone's cultivation level when the void effect hit the continent of Elon and Azair. But, it could determine someone's cultivation even when they were inside the void. No one bothered to look for someone's cultivation in the southern continent because there was no point in that until the Dark Lord started to use arch energy within the void line. Celici placed the spyglass back on the table and continued. Although he uses energy, the moment he stepped into the void line, his cultivation went from immortal to core formation. Celici slowly turned around and placed her hand on the portrait of Olympus. This thing around his wrist is what gives him the ability to use cultivation within the void line. If we take this out, he'll be as weak as a commoner. How certain are you of this? Asked Victoria. I'd bet my life on it. Each of you will get one when we wrap this up. So if you don't believe me, you are welcome to take this and monitor the Dark Lord from one of our safe houses. Chapter 849 Money Problem. Michael took a long nap on his comfy bed with Gaia under the storm's lullaby. Even after the storm had disappeared, the sky was still dark and gloomy, leaving only clusters of drizzling gray clouds. The Dark Army and everyone in the castle didn't know the Dark Lord had returned from the demon's grave. So it was just another day for them. When Michael finally opened his eyes, he saw Gaia curled up under the warm blanket attached to him like a koala bear. He slowly pulled away her hands and left the bed while trying his best not to wake her up. As usual, Michael entered the bathroom attached to his bedroom and took a long bath. Although he kept his body clean using arch energy, he was accustomed to taking baths. Then, he wore a new set of round-neck full-sleeve shirt, long coat, trousers, and boots. Of course, everything was in black, as he liked. After a long time, Michael had two swords on his back, forming the shape X. Standing before the 6-foot mirror, Michael combed his hair, rolled his sleeves to his elbows, and left the room. Good morning, Gaia purred as she slowly woke up from her sleep. She rubbed her eyes and stretched her arms above her head. Michael stood there as Gaia came to him, pecked him on the cheek, and went inside the bathroom to take a bath. He waited for her outside. While waiting for her, Michael took out an empty parchment and a quill. His world table was located before the table because of Michael's habit of gazing at the horizon. He placed the parchment on the table and sat on the chair. What do I need? Michael rubbed his head through the hair with the quill and listed everything he needed to brew his special brew in his mind. One by one, Michael wrote everything on the parchment. Except for the herbs that were only found in destinies, Michael needed a cauldron big enough to hold 1,000 liters of liquid. Fortunately, the dwarves had finished building a new alchemy hall for Michael to start his work. The next thing he required was the bottles to hold the brew. Certainly, he couldn't hold the brew in vials. Instead, he needed glass bottles. When it came to glass bottles, the only place to get them from was Dalgarum. Once he got all the required items, he could finish the brew in a day or two. As he finished writing his list, Gaia exited the bathroom, smelling like a newly blossomed jasmine. Once again, she kissed him on the cheek and unsheathed his swords without noticing the parchment in his hand. The sword almost slipped out of her hand, but she managed to grab it by the hilt with both her hands in time. Bloody hell. It's heavy, Gaia gasped. She had to use a bit of her strength to lift the sword back into the air and swing. Careful, Michael warned Gaia. Now that you can forge weapons, why don't we visit this magic forge of yours and forge something for me? Asked Gaia while swinging around the dark sword. Do you have something in mind? Michael asked Gaia. Yesterday when Gaia told him everything that happened, she seemed particularly intrigued by the Death Kiss crossbows which reminded Michael of handguns. With his inventor and blacksmith traits, he planned to fuse energy and his knowledge of modern weapons to create new kinds of weapons. Equipping Big Bertha with torpedoes was the first step in that plan. Maybe, Gaia nodded. Michael finished his list and put it inside his coat pocket. Then, he stood up from the chair. Let me guess, you want something like the Death Kiss crossbows? Looking at the glowing smile on her face, Michael could tell he had guessed it right. She then came to him with the dark sword on her shoulder. Can you make me one? I can make one better, Michael casually shrugged. Given the right materials, Michael would forge better weapons. Unfortunately, most of the weapons in his mind required special runes that could only be bought from the system. So he had to postpone forging new weapons until he could settle the debt. Besides, a portal was required to reach his forge, and he was nowhere close to building one. He wasn't an expert in portals, but he knew it would cost him millions which he didn't have. They were in dire need of gold coins. Hopefully, Michael could get his new revenue stream up and running. Otherwise, they would be in big trouble because although the Dark Army was loyal to him, loyalty wouldn't fill their bellies and keep their needs in check. But you have to wait for some time. First, we need to fix the financial side of things. Gaia rolled her eyes, giving him an it's about time look. Connect me with the twins. I want them to get me some things, said Michael. He then took the dark sword from her hand and unsheathed it. Following Michael, Gaia contacted Azazel and conveyed Michael's order. The corridors and the walls looked much better than when he left the castle a few weeks ago. He had yet to see the building process and hoped to get more coins before the dwarves stopped the construction works. Not because they needed gold coins as their wage but because they needed materials and materials that didn't come for free. Even the Dark Lord had to buy things using gold coins. There were several rooms on the way to the meeting hall, which were blocked by crates and stones. The dwarves were yet to finish building those rooms, according to Gaia's exact prerequisites. She oversaw everything and gave the dwarves the challenge of their life. Although the Dark Army kidnapped these dwarves had grown to love the challenge of building the Dark Castle. It was nothing like they had ever built. Every single dwarf was handpicked by Gaia as she settled down for nothing but the best. On top of the talented dwarves, Elidor worked with a group of rune masters to engrave defensive and offensive runes throughout the castle. The past Dark Lord's castle and the arrays alone killed thousands of guardians and enemies who dared to step onto the Dark Ocean. At its peak, the castle was nothing but a death trap feared by everyone in the world. If the past Dark Lord was alive, he would be proud of his current self because the castle Michael was building was shaping up to be more powerful than its earlier version. The meeting hall was dimly lit with torches instead of chandeliers. The flickering light illuminated by the torches added an eeriness to the hall. When Michael and Gaia reached the meeting hall, they saw Azazel was waiting for them. "My lord," Azazel bowed deeply. His gaze immediately fell on the dark swords as he could feel the threatening aura radiating from the swords. Azazel then proceeded to pull out Michael's and Gaia's thrones for them to sit on. After they settled into their respective thrones, Azazel waved his hand as the stone table slowly split open in the middle. A mirror rose from the hole and flickered for a moment before showing the faces of Titus and Optimus. The twins looked different with their cropped haircuts and brightened faces. Keeping them off the battleground was the best decision Gaia made for them. She had her doubts when she made them the procurer of rare goods and everything for the Dark Army for the best price possible. However, the twins surprised Gaia by making contact throughout Elon and Azair and dealing with the merchants themselves. It wouldn't be an understatement to say the Dark Castle solely depended on the twins for the construction materials. My lord, my lady, the twins bowed as their eyes glistened with gratefulness and respect. I'd love to have a chit-chat with you guys, but I am kinda in a rush. So let me cut to the chase. I need everything on this list as soon as possible. Michael took out a parchment and raised it so the twins could take a good look at the things he had written on the yellow parchment. Titus quickly scribbled everything down on a piece of paper. Thanks to their experience, Titus and Optimus were able to give Michael a rough estimate of how much everything on the list would cost him. My lord, if we are to get everything you want, it's gonna cost at least 50 million. Gaia's brows arched up as she snatched the parchment from Michael's hand and read everything from top to bottom. What in the hell would cost 50 million? She muttered. But when she saw the epic class cauldron, the largest size, Titus' words made sense to her. Why stop for epic? Just write down you need legendary class, Gaia said sarcastically. Titus and Optimus scratched their heads, looking at the Dark Queen bicker with the Dark Lord himself. She was the only person in the entire army who had the guts to yell at him. Believe it or not, this was one of the many reasons the subordinates trusted the Dark Lord more than the Great Eight clans, because an evil person, as they claimed, would never sit there and listen to a woman yell at him. On the contrary, they knew only one with a kind heart and humanity intact would respect and listen to his female counterpart. Whatever. Just get him what he needs. I assume you two need some time to locate everything on the list, Gaia asked as the twins nodded. Give us 5 days, my lord, asked Optimus. We need time to get the coins for the items. Gaia leaned closer to Michael and whispered into his ears. Michael nodded. Getting the coins they needed was Gaia's specialty, and she had done a better job than he ever could have. Hence, Michael trusted Gaia to deal with it as she always did. She already started to rub her chin, formulating a plan inside her head. If the twins were right, they needed 50 million in 5 days. Then I expect you to report to me in 5 days, said Michael. Chapter 850 Opportunity arises. Michael was about to leave the meeting hall after talking to the twins when Azazel received a call from Sadie. My lord, Lady Sadie has learned something important, Azazel said. Put her through then. Michael motioned him to connect Sadie to the mirror before them. Azazel nodded and flicked his wrist as the mirror flickered for a moment before showing Sadie's face. Sadie was pleasantly surprised to see Michael without his mask or the usual black armor. His current attire reminded Sadie of the time she first met him. At that time, she was far stronger than him. Everything felt like a dream to Sadie. In such a short time, the cocky guy she met at the Heavenly Gate competition went from Foundation stage warrior to the Dark Lord who was at the Immortal stage. Looking at Michael's charming face, her cherry-red lips curled upwards, radiating a bright smile. My lord, Sadie grabbed her long sky-blue skirt and curtsied Michael. How are you, Sadie? Michael asked with a gentle smile. I am perfectly fine, my lord. Thank you for asking, Michael nodded. Sorry to break the reunion, but tell us, what have you learned? Gaia interjected. It was not like Gaia was jealous or something, but she didn't like wasting time when they had to earn 50 million in 5 days. Time was of the essence. Princess Chanel Forbes was cursed by an elven mage, my lord. Sadie took a deep breath and said. Her words stunned Michael for a moment. The name Forbes rang a bell inside his head. If he was right, the king of Kethin, Noah's homeland, was called Porter Forbes. Princess of Kethin? Gaia asked as Sadie nodded. When Gaia was the princess of Nagaland, she met Chanel at a gala and exchanged a few words. Of course, Gaia paid little to no attention to Chanel or any other nobles. She hated those galas and always found an excuse to escape midway. Go on, tell us everything you know, Gaia gestured at Sadie to continue. The gears inside her head slowly started to turn, formulating a plan to get the 50 million gold coins and maybe more. This felt like a God-sent opportunity to Gaia. She knew about Michael's curse-breaking skill. Thus, if Chanel was indeed cursed, she had a way to break the curse and save the day for King Porter. King Porter's close friend is a regular customer of one of the dance houses in Rosegate. I have some of my girls working there since it's where the nobles tend to let their tongues loose. A few hours ago, this man had a little too much ale and spurted out that the elves had cursed the princess. Recently, Princess Chanel cancelled all her visits and completely went dark. I heard rumors from the maids that they were ordered not to disturb the princess no matter what. Sade paused for a moment and continued. I had my doubts for a while because I felt something was amiss. Especially after Hendrix Gardner paid the king an unofficial visit. So I ordered my girls to work on the ministers. Hendrix Gardner, Michael muttered to himself. The last time Michael met this 6-star alchemist in the alchemy competition, the vampires almost killed him. He would have died if Michael wasn't there. At that time, Michael only wanted Gabriel to die. Michael wondered what the old man thought when he realized the young man sat beside him and judged the competition was the Dark Lord himself. Apparently, the princess has only 3 more days to live. What about Noah and the Guardians? If the princess only had 3 more days to live, King Porter would have approached Noah and asked for his help, right? After all, Noah is still a citizen of Kethen, said Gaia. Plus, she is a princess. I wouldn't be surprised if she were in love with Noah, Michael chuckled. The last time I heard from our guy in the guild, Noah and his team were planning to venture into the treacherous ocean to find a way to break the curse, then we have to beat them to the princess and save her instead. Gaia leaned back on her throne. Considering Noah took the weapon and the prototype out of her hands, it was only fair that she returned the favor to him by curing the princess before he could. For a price, Gaia snickered. Unlike Noah, Michael didn't need to go to the treacherous ocean to break the curse. Michael could break the curse in a few minutes if he wished, thanks to his curse breaker skill. On the other hand, Michael laughed inside, thinking Noah would come out of the treacherous ocean empty-handed because he had taken the curse-breaking artifact long ago. So unless there was another similar artifact in the treacherous ocean that even the system didn't know of, Noah would stumble upon nothing but sticks and stones. Did you learn anything about why the elves cursed the princess? How she ended up getting cursed by the elves? Gaia frowned in doubt. The continent Elon had the lowest number of elves in the entire world. Many people in Elon would die without seeing an elf in their entire lives because the elves tended to live in Ar and avoided Elon because they thought Elon continent was a backwater place and beneath their standards. Besides, the elves wouldn't go around cursing people without a valid reason. If they chose to curse her instead of killing her, Gaia knew there must be a reason behind it. According to the man, it's the usual cliché, my lady. Long story short, Princess Chanel met an elf when she was visiting Kingdom Thera and fell in love. She wanted to marry him against King Porter's wishes. She tried to run away with the elf, except the king caught them both and ordered his men to beat the crap out of the elf. The next day, the elf's uncle personally paid King Porter a visit and gifted Chanel an evil curse as a reminder of the king's mistake of raising his hand against his kind. Michael chuckled as it reminded him of Claire's story. She laughed at Chanel inside for thinking she could be with the elf and live happily ever after. If anything, Chanel was lucky the elves didn't curse all her family. But when Michael thought about it, the elf chose Chanel over her family because he wanted her family to suffer more. Imagine seeing your only daughter dying slowly and painfully while you stand there and do nothing. The elf wanted King Porter to feel helpless and blame himself for the rest of his life. That does sound like what an elf would do, said Michael. It seems all the princesses are rebels. Michael turned his gaze toward Gaia and winked. Instead of giving Michael a snarky comment, Gaia just rolled her eyes. Then, Gaia turned her gaze back to Sadie. This is indeed good news. You've been doing a marvelous job so far, Sadie. Gaia couldn't help praising Sadie. Everyone, including Michael, knew how hard it was to impress the princess of Nagaland, but Sadie managed to do just that. In a short amount of time, Sadie turned a guardian into their spy. inserted her girls in almost every part of the world, created a web of spy networks, assisted other subordinates with their tasks, and slowly solidated her place as the next sect leader of the Silver Moon. It was no simple task, especially when she had to work under Noah's growing influence. "It's my pleasure to serve you, my lady." Sadie bowed her head and opened her mouth for a moment before closing it. She looked as though she wanted to say something but didn't know how to. Both Michael and Gaia noticed Sadie's change in behavior. "Is there something else you want to share, Sadie?" Michael asked her. Sadie looked at Michael and Sadie for a few moments before taking a deep breath. "Yesterday, I had a meeting with a guardian." She attended the tea party arranged by Alvaro's aunt, one of the elders in Silvermoon. "The questions she asked me and the way she looked at me just left me with a bad feeling," said Sadie with a worried tone. "Alvaro is our inside man, right?" Michael asked Sadie to see her nodding. "Lord Saber warned us about her visit. So I was prepared." Still. Sadie's words trailed off. "Should I put a hit on her through Arya?" Gaia asked, but Michael shook his head before Sadie could give her answer to Gaia. "For now, act like nothing happened," Michael said to Sadie, turning his head to look at Azazel. "Tell Trista to send one of her minions to shadow the guardian who met Sadie." "My lord," Sadie interrupted Michael as he turned his gaze back to Sadie. "She is going to the treacherous ocean with Noah," Sadie muttered. Michael rubbed his stubble beard for a moment until he found a way to deal with this annoyance. It was obvious to Michael that this girl was trying to impress Noah, but Michael didn't know how much the girl knew about Sadie and why she took an interest in her. Since Sadie was far too valuable to risk, Michael had to find a way to keep Sadie out of the Guardian Guild's crosshair. As long as Noah was with her, Michael knew he wouldn't be able to take her out. Besides, if he did, Noah would automatically realize Sadie had something to do with the Dark Lord. Therefore, Michael's only viable option was to follow this girl until he knew more about everything. Then, when she comes out, tell Trista to shadow the girl. "I want to know everything about her. If push comes to shove, I will deal with her personally." Michael's voice turned grave. After becoming the Dark Lord, Michael was rarely involved in problems like this. Instead, he had subordinates to solve them for him. But this felt like something he had to deal with it personally. After hearing Michael's words, Sadie heaved a sigh of relief. With the Dark Lord's reassurance, Sadie could rest easy. The last thing Sadie wanted was a guardian to snoop around. After all, she was just a few months away from getting crowned as the next sect leader. Chapter 851 Breaking the Curse for a Price. Princess Chanel's room was nothing like a typical princess room. Contrary to bright colors, Chanel used dark colors to decorate her room. The walls looked gloomy, with dark brown paint and a lack of light through the royal red curtains covering the windows. Chanel decorated the room with numerous things she had collected through visits to other kingdoms. Her room was a chaotic mess, but it had a certain rhythm. On the corner, she put a sofa set facing the fireplace. Several book racks filled with texts, scrolls, and artifacts were a few meters away from the fireplace. Next to these book racks, she had a wide closet containing all her dresses, and at last, her bed was located between a study table and a 6-feet-tall bonsai tree. The tree had grown out of shape and looked as though no one had pruned it for weeks. The lack of light made leaves look a little paler than their usual jade green. In the dark room, a couple of people gathered around the bed where Princess Chanel was groaning in pain. The princess was a charming beauty with striking blonde hair inherited from her mother and hazel eyes from her father. Her smooth, silky skin lost its glow due to the curse, and the princess herself looked thin and weak. Even her collarbones and cheekbones became visible to others because she hadn't eaten for weeks. The curse affected her very soul, and as a result, her body couldn't sustain itself using arch energy. Princess Chanel squirmed and kicked her legs in excruciating pain. She closed her eyes and clenched the royal red bedsheets under her as tight as she could. Princess Chanel's mother, Queen Clarice, gently brushed the hair flowing onto Chanel's face and sobbed. Tears rolled out of the queen's red eyes sitting atop dark circles. The queen held Chanel's hands and sat beside her while the others looked at the princess in pain helplessly. "Your Majesty," an old man wearing golden robes embroidered with silver threads raised his voice, cutting through the silence in the room. King Porter Forbes was not in his kingly robes but wore a plain shirt and brown trousers. He looked more like a commoner than a king with his messy dark hair and untrimmed beard with patches of white hair. Porter Forbes sat at the end of Chanel's bed with his hands folded. His hazel eyes glimmered with helplessness and grief. He was desperate for help. Even the six-star alchemist Hendrix Gardner couldn't do anything to lift the curse. All he could do was ease Chanel's pain and make her life easier until her body and soul gave up. The sight of his daughter groaning in pain was eating him from within. "It's time we break this news to the citizens," said the old man, one of the most loyal people who worked for Porter Forbes. Everyone in the room shared the same pain as King Porter and Queen Clarice because they saw Chanel grow up to be a young lady from a baby. They loved the princess like she was their own. Unlike the royal courts, everyone loved Porter Forbes. He was a kind and benevolent king. The old man's voice stuttered as he couldn't say what he really wanted to. Everyone who checked Chanel had told them one thing: the curse cannot be lifted. Some even said the king and queen should make peace and say goodbye to Chanel. King Porter's last resort was the Guardians, but even though Noah was a god, he lacked the powers to perform the miracle of lifting the curse. "How can I?" the king muttered. "Arg!" Suddenly, Chanel began to scream and frantically wriggled on the bed. Queen Clarice quickly wrapped her slender arm around Chanel's waist and stopped her daughter from rolling out of bed. Meanwhile, Porter grabbed Chanel's legs and tried to lessen her squirming. Princess Chanel's scream echoed through the room, making everyone shudder. The way she screamed and shouted really made them want to leave the room as soon as possible. They weren't strong enough to stay there and see the princess in agony. Princess Chanel continued to suffer for almost an hour. By the time she stopped screaming, her body had no strength left to move. Except for the muffled groans, no words or sounds came out of Chanel's mouth. Porter's heart told him to have hope and expect Noah to return with a cure, while his mind told him to accept the inevitable. He was unfortunate enough to know how powerful elven curses are. One of the elven rune masters who examined Chanel's soul told him that no one could lift the curse, including the one who put the curse in the first place. The curse was unliftable and shouldn't have been used on a human, according to the elf. So nothing would happen even if the Empress herself ordered the elf who put the curse to lift it. Porter's eyes became watery as he slowly turned around to address everyone in the room. "Please leave us alone for a moment," Porter's voice broke off. "Take all the time you need, Your Majesty. We will take care of everything else," said the old man before leaving the room with the others. After everyone left the room, Porter finally let go of the tears in his eyes. His legs refused to take a step forward. He moved like a snail, reached his wife's side, and collapsed on the bed. Chanel was their only daughter, and the memories they had with Chanel flashed before their eyes. "Is this the end, Porter?" Queen Clarice broke into tears. Words barely escaped her mouth. Porter couldn't even give Clarice a few comforting words because he knew there was no way of helping Chanel. If there was a chance of remotely lifting the curse, Noah would have given them hope. Even he told Porter to strengthen his heart and mind and prepare for anything. "Why do the gods want this for us? What did we do wrong? If there was a god, he wouldn't have let this happen to our daughter," Porter said, gritting his teeth. The helplessness he felt turned into anger, and when Clarice talked about the gods, Porter snapped. But little did they know that when they needed a god, the one who arrived to help was the devil. The curtains slowly swayed to the wind as Porter and Clarice felt a cold breeze. Everyone around them darkened as the dim light orbs flickered. At first, they thought the wind caused the orbs to flicker. But then, everything grew darker to the point Porter and Clarice couldn't see what was before them. The room turned pitch black. A few seconds later, the orbs flickered back to life, giving them just enough light to illuminate a third figure in the room. Porter's pupils shrunk as he saw someone sitting on the other side of Chanel's bed. Porter's warrior instincts kicked in as he quickly rose from the bed. He instinctively reached for the sword and grabbed the side of his waist where he used to have his sword. Queen Clarice's motherly instinct made her pull Chanel close to her. A calm voice resonated through the room when Porter was about to shout out for the guards. "You wouldn't make a sound if you want your daughter to live." The words made Porter's heart skip a beat and prevented him from making a sound. As much as Porter wanted the guards to come running into the room, he wanted to know if there was some truth to the intruder's words. "Show yourself," Porter ordered the intruder. A candle slowly flew past him and hovered beside the intruder. Then, the intruder lit the candle with a snap of his fingers. To Porter's shock, the candlelight illuminated the face that terrified everyone, the Dark Lord. Porter's heart almost stopped when he saw the Dark Lord's eyes that glowed like bloodstones. Dark Lord. Queen Clarice trembled from head to toe. Her fear of the Dark Lord paralyzed Clarice's body. As Porter was searching for words, the Dark Lord rested his head on his fist and sat on the throne with his leg atop the other. The king and queen had no idea how he managed to enter the castle without raising any alarms. If he wanted them dead, there was nothing to stop them. However, his glowing eyes didn't contain any killing intent within. "Where there is pain, let there be darkness," Porter and Clarice heard the Dark Lord's bone-chilling voice. Their minds were in too much shock to process his words. "I am the only God who listened to your pain and came here to help. Tell me, Porter, will you save your daughter or deny my help and let your daughter die in pain?" The Dark Lord's words sounded slow and deep. Each word struck them like an arrow. If this was any other situation, Porter would have called out the guards and fought the Dark Lord himself despite the obvious results. Still, Porter was a God-fearing man who would rather die fighting evil than serve one to live. However, he couldn't bring himself to refuse the Dark Lord's help when his daughter's life depended on his words. "You have 5 seconds to decide. Your daughter's life is in your hands now," said the Dark Lord. He didn't give them much time to think about anything except Chanel's life. This was the small light of hope they had in days. Everything and everyone failed them, and in 3 days, their daughter would die in pain. Any parent at this time would give anyone anything to save their child, and Porter and Clarice were no different. 1. The Dark Lord raised a finger. 2. He raised another finger and continued to count. "Save her," Porter answered him when the Dark Lord reached count 4. 200 million and your teleportation portal. That would be the price for your daughter's life. Porter wasn't surprised because he expected to pay the price when the man before him was the Dark Lord. However, Porter and Clarice felt glad that the price for saving their daughter was gold coins and the portal instead of their souls or anything that would forever bind them to the Dark Lord. "You can take whatever you want as long as you lift this curse from my daughter." Porter rushed the Dark Lord when Chanel's groans got louder. They shuddered when the Dark Lord rose from his throne and stepped toward their daughter. Part of them wanted to keep Chanel away from the Dark Lord's reach, but they stood still like statues, looking at the Dark Lord placing his hand on Chanel's head. As soon as the Dark Lord touched Chanel, her body trembled. A glow appeared in Chanel's chest as Porter and Clarice watched the glow getting brighter and brighter until they heard something snap. After they heard a sound like a twig break, the Dark Lord took his hand away from Chanel and stepped back. "Father," Porter heard the word he thought he would never hear again. Under his watery gaze, Chanel slowly opened her eyes. Chapter 852 Portal to the Forge. King Porter Forbes and Queen Clarice spent the entire day with Chanel, who was miraculously cured by someone. The ministers were speechless to see Chanel walking out of her room fully healed. The king and queen went with the story that the curse suddenly disappeared from Chanel's soul. As much as the monsters and the nobles doubted Porter's words, they had no other explanation. The possibility of the Dark Lord entering the castle and lifting the curse had never come across their minds. That day, King Porter ordered the servants to prepare a lavish feast, celebrating Chanel's recovery. The evening sun cast long shadows upon Kingdom Cethern. As the slanting rays of the setting sun gave a warm orange tinge to the horizon, the darkness slowly shrouded the rest of the world. Soon, Rosegate was aglow with bright city lights, and the castle stood atop the Jill like a fully decorated Christmas tree. When everyone in the castle returned to their rooms to cultivate and sleep, King Porter and Queen Clarice sat on the edge of their beds, holding each other's hands. They looked exhausted and nervous. Their eyes frantically moved around the room as though they were searching for someone. "Where is he?" Queen Clarice muttered. "He said he would meet us here at midnight," King Porter said. Since Chanel was cured, his eyes looked lively and filled with life. Unlike when he was in Chanel's room, Porter looked like a proper king now, with his hair neatly combed and embroidered royal red robes. Despite the concerns in their hearts, they remained silent, waiting for the Dark Lord. Silence swept across the room, and a wolf's howl in the distance kept them company. Eventually, the light orbs in the room started to flicker just like the orbs in Chanel's room when the Dark Lord arrived. Suddenly, the light radiating from the orbs got snuffed out as darkness completely took over the room. Their hearts shuddered and prepared to meet the Dark Lord. In a blink of an eye, the orbs lit up again. Although King Porter and Queen Clarice expected the Dark Lord to arrive, they still felt a bolt of shock running down their spines when they saw him sitting on a throne made of skulls and bones before them. Their bodies jolted up from the bed as if the bed was on fire. "How is the princess?" Michael asked King Porter and Queen Clarice. They were surprised to hear the humanity in his voice, unlike before. "She is doing good," King Porter answered. "Under any other circumstances, would have lifted the curse for no payment. But even I have some obligations." "As a ruler, I think you would understand," said Michael. They lived long enough to apprehend whether someone was speaking from their heart or just tallying through the teeth. Hence, his words actually surprised both the Queen and King because they sounded genuine. "Please take this." King Porter slowly removed the space ring from his finger and extended it toward the Dark Lord. The ring ascended into the air, floating toward him. Michael quickly took a look inside the space ring and saw stacks of gold coins. The system scanned the space ring and confirmed the amount inside, 200 million. "I ordered my men to leave the portal room as you said," said King Porter. After seeing Chanel laugh once again when he thought they had lost her, King Porter didn't regret making a deal with the Dark Lord at all. Deep down, they felt grateful to the Dark Lord because if it wasn't for him, Chanel would never have been cured. It was he who answered their prayers. So no matter what the world said about him, to them, he was a man who saved their daughter. Besides, he just asked for 200 million and a portal which was practically nothing to a king. The only problem was King Porter had to deal with the generals and the ministers about the sudden disappearance of the portal. He just hoped the Guardians or Noah wouldn't become suspicious of his dealing with the Dark Lord. Eladir and his minions were dismantling the portal and teleporting the parts as they were speaking. Instead of building a new portal that would cost 300 million, Eladir suggested Michael get an existing one. Then, he could modify the portal to connect the castle to the forge using the copper ring left behind by the past Dark Lord. Luckily for Michael, King Porter had recently built a teleportation portal with the help of Ice Fair Duke. "Just remember one thing, King Porter, every coin has two sides. Do not believe everything you hear," said the Dark Lord, rising from his throne. He strolled to the wind with his hands stuffed in his pants pockets. "What should we do if the elf wants to harm Chanel again?" asked Queen Clarice. Since the Dark Lord was kind enough to lift the curse, she hoped he would discreetly do something about the elves. But what she really wanted was for the elf who cursed Chanel to die because as long as the elf was alive, Chanel's life would always be in danger. As a mother and a queen, she had to protect Chanel, even if that meant striking another deal with the Dark Lord. "You should ask this to Noah. He will deal with the elves." As much as I'd like to rip apart the elf who cursed the princess, it's better for Noah to deal with them instead of me, because the less I involve in your lives, the better, said Michael. Dealing with the elves was not a big matter to Michael. In fact, he had multiple ways of dealing with them. Option number 1, he could put a hit on the elf with Arya. Option number 2, he could ask the Empress herself to keep the elves in check. But instead of choosing the first two options, Michael went with option number 3, let Noah deal with the elves, which would undoubtedly lead to Noah pissing off the elves. As a result, Noah would become an enemy of the elves, and the more enemies he had, the better for Michael. Down the road, Michael could even team up with the elves in the battle against Noah. They say I am evil, but I never tortured a girl before her parents' eyes and intended them to see their daughter slowly die, Michael shrugged. Anyways, if I were you, I'd keep Chanel out of AR and seek the Guardian Guild's help. Elves are vengeful creatures. You should be more careful dealing with them in the future. With a flick of his wrist, Michael took out a card with the skull embossed in the center. He put the card on the table beside him and turned his gaze back to King Porter and Queen Clarice. Keep this hidden if you want to contact me again. But if you don't feel like it, throw it away, said Michael. Michael was about to use the runic teleportation to leave the castle when King Porter stepped forward. Dark Lord, Porter called out to Michael. Thank you. When Michael turned around, King Porter lowered his head. We are grateful for what you did for our daughter, Queen Clarice slowly said. You are good people. You don't deserve such punishment. As he said, Michael willed the system to teleport him back to the Dark Castle, leaving Queen Clarice and King Porter behind. After he left, the throne vanished into thin air as King Porter and Queen Clarice exhaled heavily. Back in the castle, Elodie was running back and forth inside an empty hall that was still reeked of fresh wood and marble. Grand chandeliers lit the room brightly and illuminated the giant circular portal in the center of the room. The portal's outer structure was made of pure silver, and the dwarves built the steps with marble. At that moment, Elodie was busy carving runes on the silver ring while the copper ring Michael gave him was lying on the floor. You are back. Elodie noticed Michael entering the room and stopped what he was doing. Seeing the proud elf bow toward him despite his busy work was surprising to Michael. When Michael approached the portal, he noticed the runes dimly glowing and pulsating energy. So everything went well? Asked Michael. The portal hall was empty, as you told us. I assume King of Kethern won't become a problem for us in the future, asked Elodie as Michael motioned him to continue his work. I don't think so. You know, the Queen asked me if I could help them with the elf situation. Michael talked to Elodie while the elf was carving runes on the portal. What did you tell her? They all hate and loathe you until they need your help, huh? Elodie snickered. I said let Noah deal with the elves. It's his job as the Supreme Guardian to keep his people safe. Besides, I have a feeling Noah would piss off the elves and make an enemy out of them like he always does, Michael chuckled. As long as Andreas is with him, we cannot predict Noah's behavior. The Andreas I know is a rebel and a man with an iron will. If he sets his mind to do something, he will do it no matter what. Suppose he wasn't there 3,000 years ago, we could have destroyed the Great 8 clans in a few weeks. That bastard ruined everything, Elodie snarled. I wasn't there 3,000 years ago, was I? I would like to see him try that again. Michael cracked his fingers. After we finish the portal, we should go to the forge and complete our new weapon for Big Bertha, said Michael. I looked into the design and came up with the necessary runes. But those runes require a huge amount of energy. At one point, you have to come up with an alternative for arch-energy crystals, one problem at a time, Elodie. We still haven't mined a quarter of the crystals in the mountain, said Michael. As far as Michael was concerned, Mugashuk's energy radiation would continue to form crystals in the Stormville mountain, and that Hydra wasn't going anywhere soon. So Michael didn't need to worry about the arch-energy crystals running out. Chapter 853 Forging the Torpedoes. Elodie and Michael spent an entire day working together to finish the portal. They lost track of time and ignored everything that happened outside the hall. Gaia often entered the hall to bring Michael and Ellider something to eat and drink. Other than that, Michael received no visitors, rather, Gaia took care of everything. Now, if you put a crystal in there, Ellider pointed at a tubular-shaped golden pipe next to the portal. The metal tube ran into the ground and connected at the portal's bottom under the steps. It was Michael's task to build an intricate mechanism that turned arch-energy crystals into pure energy that could be used to activate the portal. No one needed the mechanism outside the southern continent since the atmosphere itself contained pure arch-energy, and the runes could harness this energy. Considering the southern continent's atmosphere had no arch-energy, Michael had to build such a device. In other words, without Michael, no one could build a portal inside the void line, no matter how many rune masters tried. Michael retrieved a big chunk of crystal, dropped it into the pipe, and waited for the portal to absorb the energy. The metal pipe vibrated, letting out a purr. White smoke slowly escaped the metal pipe as Michael sensed an intense heat radiating from the pipe. "It's working," Ellider said when he noticed the runes began to glow on the metal ring around the open space where the vortex was supposed to appear. These intricate symbols began to glow brighter and brighter until Michael felt the space around him distort. It was like an invisible magnet pulling him closer. With a suppressed boom, a crimson-red vortex appeared within the ring in a blink of an eye. "Let's bring some creature and send it through the portal first," Ellider said. But he was too late to realize Michael had already dashed into the portal. When Michael entered the vortex, everything went dark for a split second, and then, the scenery around him changed. He appeared right at the entrance to his forge. The forge looked the same as when he had left it a few days before. Before he stepped into the forge, he turned around to see if the vortex was still there. Surprisingly, there was no swirling vortex behind him. Instead, all he could see was a glowing rune on the wall. Michael instinctively placed his hand on the rune that resembled a swirl. The moment he touched the rune, the wall trembled. Then, the wall slowly split open, forming an archway. Inside the archway, Michael saw the crimson-red vortex. Michael strolled toward the portal and entered it once again to reach Ellider. "That was dangerous," Ellider snarled when Michael stepped out of the portal. "We are the best at what we do." "So I didn't have to worry," Michael shrugged. Besides, the system would have warned him if the portal led to somewhere else than the forge. "Follow me. The forge awaits," said Michael. Ellider followed Michael into the portal and stepped into the demon's grave for the first time in his life. The forge welcomed Ellider with its scorching heat. Ellider didn't even spend a few seconds in the forge as he began to sweat bullets. As soon as Michael entered the forge, he removed his long coat and the full-sleeve shirt he wore beneath. "Why is it so hot here?" The heat he felt was nothing like he had ever felt. It was like someone put him inside a boiling cauldron. On top of that, the furnace wasn't even burning. Michael chuckled, seeing Ellider getting drenched in his own sweat. "We are inside a volcanic mountain. Take a look at this." Michael walked to the furnace and pulled the lever as the golden lava oozed into the furnace through the pipes hanging above. "What do you mean a volcano?" asked Ellider. "Come with me." Michael walked out of the forge and headed outside to show Ellider where they were. Ellider followed him through a dark narrow corridor until they reached a dead end. What he thought was a dead end turned out to be a door when the Dark Lord placed his hand on the wall. The moment Michael opened the door, an intense scorching heat wave brushed past Ellider, almost burning his hair. "Careful," said Michael, shielding Ellider from tripping down the narrow path and falling down right into the bubbling lava. Now Ellider realized what he meant by inside a volcanic mountain. "As I said before, I cannot fly in the demon's grave. So to get up there, we need to climb." Michael pointed at the top of the mountain. "But if you do not want, we can return to the forge." Michael knew although Ellider was inside the body of a half-elf, he still behaved like a dark elf who was extremely sensitive to dry or hot weather. The last thing Michael wanted was to hear Ellider bitch about climbing the mountain. However, Ellider surprised Michael with his answer. I am not a delicate young flower. Of course, I want to climb. Follow my lead if you can, Dark Lord. Ellider snickered and started to climb the wall like he was an expert mountain climber. I didn't expect that. Michael's brows arched up, looking at the elf crawling up the wall without slowing down. He was not going to lose to an elf in mountain climbing, so Michael started to climb as fast as he could. Ellider was surprisingly fast, but Michael was faster than him. With a few leaps and jumpers, Michael reached the top and extended his arm to help Ellider reach the top. Where did you learn to climb like this? Michael asked Ellider as the elf grabbed Michael's hand and reached the top. When Ellider was about to answer Michael, he saw the vast open world of Demon's Grave. The sight of red skies, thunderstorms, and smoky air stunned Ellider to the core. On top of that, Ellider saw the Colossus Bull in the distance, and his jaw dropped. What in the hell is that? Ellider asked, looking at the bull. Something we don't want to mess with, said Michael. Ellider's gaze swept across the vast land. The Demon's Grave looked more terrifying than he had previously imagined. He felt lucky Skyhall prisoned him in the Oculun realm. At least he had a beautiful place for sightseeing. Almost half an hour later, Michael and Ellider returned to the forge and started working on their next project, the torpedoes. Ellider stepped outside the forge and into the dark castle to get everything they needed from the storeroom. Then, Ellider returned to the forge to see Michael starting the furnace. When he thought the temperature couldn't go any higher, the furnace surprised Ellider with its scorching heat lava. Michael put the metal ores into a large cauldron and hung it above the lava. Because they weren't dark metal ores bought from the system, the hot lava provided more than enough heat to melt them into hot gooey goodness. While Michael was working near the furnace, Ellider studied the invisible runes around the forge. To others, the runes were invisible, but to him, they glowed as bright as stars in the midnight sky. The more runes he saw, the more he realized the similarity with his own work. To be more precise, they were his work. The runes were almost everywhere, the tables, walls, ceiling, and pipes. Everywhere he turned, he saw runes. This whole forge was a beautiful mix of runes and intricate contraptions, just like the portal. The forge was a symbol of friendship between the Dark Lord and Ellider, the elf who stood by the Dark Lord's side till the last day when he reset the entire universe. As Ellider was studying the runes, Michael grabbed a 5-meter-long and 3-meter-wide metal pillar, created a mold in the shape of a cigar using the dark beams, and poured the melted metal into the mold. Michael let the metal cool down and take the desired shape. While the metal was cooling down, Michael returned to the work table and started to build the targeting system in which he needed Ellider's help. Enough gawking around. We have work to do, said Michael. Finally, Ellider snapped back to reality and turned around. This whole place has my runes, not yours per se. They belong to the past you, said Michael. I wonder what else they left behind. Judging by the complexity of each rune, I must have learned quite too much, no shit. We designed an array to reset the entire universe. So yeah, you did learn too much, Michael rolled his eyes. You can admire your work later. Now come here and help me with this, Michael ordered Ellider. Then, the two of them continued to build the torpedoes while discussing their past versions. Building torpedoes were two-man's job. First, Michael as a blacksmith had to build the outer shell and fill it with explosive materials. The second task fell on Ellider's shoulder as he had to engrave runes inside and outside to enhance the explosion's power upon contact as well as to harness the power of arch-energy crystals. It's done. After almost an hour later, Ellider heaved a sigh of relief and motioned Michael to see the torpedo on the table. On the outside, the torpedo looked like nothing more than a 1-meter-long cigar with fins at the end. The outer shell was built with metal and engraved with intricate runes which were barely visible to the naked eye. On contrary to how it looked, the torpedo was heavy as a boulder. Ellider had to use all his strength to roll it around. Upon reaching the table, Michael ran his hand through the torpedo, feeling the surface of his new Deathbringer. If his calculations were right, a single torpedo could obliterate a frigate to pieces and had a range of 20 kilometers. "Now that we've finished the hard part, let's move on to the easy part," said Michael. Obviously, he couldn't put these torpedoes into a cannon and fire it at his enemies. Instead, Michael had to build a special gun to use these torpedoes and an aiming mechanism. Thanks to Michael's inventor trait, building them was as easy as crafting a new bow to Michael. Chapter 854 Ghost Ships. The fierce sun beat upon the seemingly never-ending southern continent sea, reflecting the light into a blinding patch of shine. The sea was calm, pulsing, and breathing rhythmically. In the calm sea, a brig sailed with the wind, patrolling the seas. The ship squealed while the sails tightened and leaped forward, away from a tiny island with a couple of coconut trees. The tame lapping of ripples against the hull rang out across the bay. As the sail with a skull painted on rose higher and higher, the glistening reflection blinded Captain Fairbank, casting a dark shadow down the ship's upper deck. Slowly it blended with the calm and sparkly, orange-shaded water. The sail calmly swayed from side to side and occasionally flapped in the morning's ocean breeze. The stench of salty air gave the crew a kick of boost to tackle the day ahead of them. In the distance, a gust danced and twirled across the water's surface. The ship slowly glided forward through the mirror-like water. The puff ever so slowly crept closer as if it was the predator and everything else was the prey. "Look alive, men. We have rich fat merchants to milk," Captain Fairbanks roared. The soft breeze streamed through his red hair and oval face with blue eyes. His loose white shirt fluttered in the wind, exposing his hairy chest. Fairbanks and his crew terrorized the sea under Pirate Lord Vance until the Dark Lord decided to kill Vance and many of his pirate captains for refusing his offer to join him. Fairbanks was one of the lucky ones who were spared by the Dark Lord's wrath. "I have a report saying the Phoenix Manor merchants are on their way to Giselle for gem trading. So you men know the drill. We intercept, check their goods and make them pay their taxes." Fairbanks laughed out loud. A year ago, he wouldn't have spoken these words even if someone had put a blade against his throat. He used to pillage merchant ships to the bones and sink them for fun. Most of the pirates lived like this, and as a result, merchant ships rarely ventured into their seas. During their best days, they pillaged 1 or 2 ships every 3 months and went without pillaging for the rest of the year. Sometimes, 2 pirate groups would fight each other for a crate of rum or less. But everything changed when the Dark Lord conquered the seas and took over the pirates. He struck deals with the merchants and ordered the pirates to stop pillaging them like madmen. Instead of pillaging, the Dark Lord ordered the merchants to pay a percentage to the pirates every time they ventured into the southern continent for trade. Many pirates hated the idea of collecting taxes and not pillaging. But they did as they were told anyway because the pirates knew better than to mess with the Dark Lord. Those who did were brutally murdered and thrown to the sharks in front of the other pirates as a warning sign. Fairbanks was one of those who wanted to avoid ending up being shark food. At first, Fairbanks and his crew were skeptical about the Dark Lord's unconventional order, but the number of merchant ships coming to the southern continent gradually increased. Within 6 months, there were more merchant ships than pirate ships on the seas. As a result, the pirates were able to make more coins as their cut from the tax than they ever did pillaging. The pirates who felt skeptical and hated the Dark Lord for preventing them from pillaging quickly changed their minds about him. Under the Dark Lord, the pirates thrived and lived their golden age. For Fairbanks, this was just another relaxing day at the sea. His task was to intercept the merchant ships and tax them according to the goods they were carrying. After all these times, Fairbanks could do the tasks in his sleep. As he was sailing on the calm sea, his quartermaster, a dark-skinned man with nose piercing, rushed toward Fairbanks. "Captain, we have spotted a ghost ship," the quartermaster said. His dark eyes contained a sliver of fear. Fairbanks had the same fear in his eyes as he heard about ships with no symbols or crest on sails attacking the pirate ships and disappearing. Rumor had it that the Dark Lord's naval army has lost 5 pirate ships to these ghost ships. Fairbanks' hands reached for the spyglass dangling on his waist and looked in the direction the quartermaster was pointing. Through the spyglass, Fairbanks saw a lone ship heading in their direction. There it was, a frigate with no symbols or crest on its gray sails. As soon as Fairbanks spotted the ghost ship, a strange bell echoed through the calm sea. It sounded like a cry mixed with both anger and sadness. "What are your orders, Captain?" asked the quartermaster. Fairbanks lowered his spyglass and turned his gaze back to the quartermaster. "Man the cannons and prepare for a battle," said Fairbanks. His voice was loud enough for the entire crew to hear him. Soon, they all grabbed a spyglass and scanned the horizon. Ghost ship spotted. At that moment, a pirate manning the crow's nest shouted, pointing at the horizon. Almost everyone on the upper deck heard and saw the ghost ship. It was too late for panic control. "Prepare the cannons," the quartermaster roared as his order swept across the deck. The pirates panicked and stood still like statues for a few moments. They spent too long collecting taxes and enjoying life without battle, so when they were ordered to prepare for battle, their bodies refused to move. It took them a few moments to realize the danger they were in. "We will bring their heads to the Dark Lord," Fairbanks shouted. The moment the crew heard the name of the Dark Lord, they snapped back to reality because the fear of the ghost ship was nowhere close to the fear they had of the Dark Lord. The crew quickly reached the cannons, and some ran down to the lower decks to convey the battle order to the crew down there. While the crew was preparing for a battle, Fairbanks raised his spyglass to take a look at the ghost ship again. To his complete shock, he saw no ship through the spyglass. He frantically moved the spyglass left and right, trying to locate the ship. Looking at Fairbanks, the quartermaster looked through his own spyglass and was stunned by the sight of an empty horizon. The ghost ship was nowhere to be found. "Do you see the ghost ship?" the quartermaster shouted at the pirate standing atop the crow's nest. But before he could answer the quartermaster, the pirate fell down from the top and splattered all over the deck, painting the floor red. The crew was stunned by what had just happened. In their shocked state, they failed to notice the iron arrow on the floor, covered in the pirate's blood and flesh. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the ghost ship appeared closer to Fairbanks' ship. The crew and the captain were caught off guard. They had no idea where it came from. "Take cover," Fairbanks shouted as every fiber in his body screamed at him to lower his head and duck. He was a veteran and had enough battle experience to guide his crew out of thick situations. However, his battle experience was overwhelmed by the sheer power of the ghost ship. All the 50 cannons on one side of the hull exploded at the same time and bombarded Fairbanks' brig. 9 out of 10 times, a brig had no chance of winning against a frigate. Unfortunately for Fairbanks, his ship was too close to the frigate and unprepared for return fire. Fairbanks ducked down and held the helm as tight as he could. When he slightly raised his head, he saw his quartermaster stumbling around the deck with a large hole in his chest. One of the cannonballs went straight through his chest. Blood oozed out of his mouth, and before the quartermaster could hit the ground, another cannonball took his head clean off. A loud whistling sound kept ringing in his ears, preventing him from thinking straight. Most of the crew were either thrown off the deck or dead by the cannon fire. When the ghost ship was reloading its cannons, Fairbanks stood up and rotated the helm as fast as he could. The ship had taken too much damage. The main sail poles were barely standing, and 1 or 2 cannonballs fire away from breaking down. As a captain, it was his task to save the ship and the rest of the crew. He frantically rotated the helm to sail away from the frigate. While trying to escape, Fairbanks looked at the ghost ship and saw the hostile crew. They were all dressed in some kind of silver robes with pointy hats. None of their faces were exposed as they covered themselves from head to toe. "Full sail!" Fairbanks shouted. He knew it was too late for them to return fire. The only hope they had was escaping the frigate before it reloads its cannons. Boom! Out of nowhere, a giant arrow hit the front deck and split open the brig in half. Fairbank failed even to see where the arrows were coming from. More arrows rained down upon the deck, impaling everyone and everything. With the front half slowly sinking down, there was no chance for Fairbank to escape the frigate that had almost finished reloading its cannons. "I am not going down without a fight," Fairbank roared as he unsheathed his cutlass. He ran toward the rope they used to board the hostile ships and tried to swing to the frigate. He could have escaped if he had let go of the rope and jumped into the water. However, he was a pirate through and through. He may have let go of pillaging, but he would never die without putting up a fight. When he was about to land on the deck, he heard another volley of explosions. Suddenly, everything turned dark around him. The last thing he remembered was a sharp pain in his head, then, his whole body felt light. Chapter 855 New Weapon for Big Bertha. Meanwhile, back in the forge, Michael finished forging everything he needed to use the torpedoes and prepared to leave. He put out the fire in the furnace while Ellider put the torpedoes in the space ring. To snuff out the flames, Michael had to pull the lever beside the furnace down. As soon as he pulled it down, a chilling stream of frost fired out of the ancient ice core and put out the flames. "Let's go," Michael said. Ellider nodded and walked toward the portal to leave the forge. After they entered the portal, a strange sensation ran through their bodies. The sudden drop in the temperature affected their bodies and minds. It took Ellider a few moments to feel normal. On the other hand, when they stepped out of the portal, Michael saw Gaia was waiting for them with Azazel. "We have a situation," Gaia creased her brows. She didn't even bother to inquire with them about the portal or the forge. Michael knew something was amiss. "What happened?" Michael asked. "Do you remember the ghost ships that's been attacking our ship in the southern continent?" Gaia asked Michael as he nodded. Corey complained about these ships at the gathering. Apparently, these ships were using hit-and-run tactics with the backup of killing themselves in case someone managed to capture them. Before leaving for the demon's grave, Michael ordered Corey to get to the bottom of it and unwrap the mystery behind those unknown ships. But judging by the look on Gaia's face, he could tell these ships had appeared once again. "They sank one of our ships a few minutes ago," said Gaia. "You should see this, my lord." Azazel handed over the tablet-sized mirror in his hand to Michael. The mirror flickered for a moment before showing Michael a calm sea from the point of view of someone near the rudder. "Captain, we have spotted a ghost ship." Michael saw a dark-skinned man in the mirror. "After a few attacks, Corey asked me for spiders so she could monitor every captain under her command." Gaia explained to Michael why the ship captain was wearing a spider. He totally focused in the mirror, searching for the ghost ship. "Ghost ship spotted." Michael saw the pirate atop the crow's nest pointing at the horizon. Soon, the pirate captain turned his gaze toward the direction the pirate pointed. "Get to the good point," said Gaia and slid her fingers through the mirror as the feed in the mirror played faster. She removed her hands from the mirror when a gray ship sailed beside the pirate captain's ship. The feed was not stable as he was covering down from cover. Still, Michael was able to pause the feed and take a clear look at the hostile ship. This frigate in the mirror had a grayish hull, sails with no crest or emblem, and a crew completely covered from head to toe. If Michael wasn't a blacksmith, he would have missed the complex build of the ship. Although it looked like a typical frigate, the ship was built differently. For example, the hull had tiny holes the size of a fist under every hull cannon. On top of that, the cannons on the upper deck were different from typical cannons. They were built in a rectangular shape instead of a conical shape. "I am not going down without a fight." Michael saw the pirate captain standing up and running toward the rope despite the bombardment. He grabbed the rope, swinging toward the ghost ship. The feed distorted in the mirror before everything turned blue. "When did this happen exactly?" asked Michael. 5 minutes ago. Big Bertha was sailing nearby, so I ordered them to head to the ambush location," said Gaia. Her eyes glimmered with killing intent, and one could literally feel the cold murderous aura around her. "They will pay for what they did," Michael calmly said. He extended his palm toward Eladir as the elf removed the space ring containing the torpedo from his finger and placed it on Michael's palm. Without uttering a word, Gaia stepped closer to him and waited for him to activate the teleportation. Thanks to the runic teleportation, Michael was able to directly reach the Big Bertha in a blink of an eye. Full sails, full sails. Short was running around Big Bertha's upper deck, ordering his crew around. As a quartermaster to the temporary captain of Big Bertha, Corey had quite an authority among the pirates. Shorty didn't earn his position by simply being cute or bootlicking but through his hard work. Michael and Gaia were impressed when he completely stopped drinking and cultivated diligently for the past year. The Olympus around Shorty's wrist was a symbol of his hard work and a painful reminder to anyone who dares to mess with him. Usually, the Big Bertha would be anchored at Corey's island and rarely sailed the seas. However, when Corey heard about another attack and the Dark Queen's order, she sailed to where the ambush happened. Since they were alone, Gaia hoped the ghost ships might try to attack Big Bertha. Unlike Fairbank's crew, the Big Bertha crew was trained to be on guard always. Among the pirates, they lived the longest and had the most battle experience. Coupled with Corey's talents in the rudder, Big Bertha could be ranked as one of the most powerful ships in the world. "Captain, I can see some debris on the water," Shorty came running to Corey and said. "Lower the sails." Corey's order surprised Shorty and the crew. They were certain that Corey would order them to raise the sails to gain maximum speed. But on the contrary, she ordered them to lower the sails. Despite the shocking order, Shorty nodded as the crew pulled down the ropes, lowering the black sail with a crimson-red skull painted on the center. The ship gradually lost its speed, and since the wind was against them, they almost came to a halt. Meanwhile, the crew loaded the cannons and the mortar on the front of the deck. Once they could see the ghost ship, they would bombard it with all the firepower they had. As they slowly sailed toward the sea, where Corey noticed black smoke emanating, Big Bertha sailed toward the debris at a snail's pace. Suddenly, Corey felt a strong gust of wind blow past her. She quickly turned around to see the Dark Lord appear out of thin air with the Dark Queen. "My lord, my lady," Corey quickly bowed toward Michael and Gaia. "Captain is on board," Shorty roared as he ran toward Michael and Gaia. He smiled from ear to ear, looking at them. Michael acknowledged Shorty with a friendly nod. Corey was about to say something when Michael ascended into the air and landed on the crow's nest. "Let's see where you are," Michael muttered to himself as his pupils shrunk to the size of a tiny dot. His perception swept across the sea. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the environmental scanning. A few seconds later, Michael's eyes abruptly opened. He slowly turned around to see a ship far away on the horizon. The ship was too far for normal eyesight or even for the spyglass. But Michael could see the ship sailing with no crest or symbol on its sails. It was the same ship that sank Fairbank's ship. There was no doubt in Michael's mind. Michael's eyes completely turned pitch black, and then his pupils glowed like rubies for a moment. "Turn around the ship and sail to the southwest," Michael's voice echoed through the ship. Following Michael's order, Gaia ascended into the air and floated to Michael's side. "Did you find it?" asked Gaia, her eyes glimmering with intense murdering intent. Michael nodded. "I'll see how they hit and run this time," Michael snickered. "Just sail toward it as slow as you can. Let them come to us. I have a surprise for them." Gaia nodded as Michael leaped from the crow's nest into the water. Under the water, everything turned dark blue. Michael willed the APD to inject a pill into his bloodstream that would allow him to breathe underwater. He moved through the water like a shark until he reached the very bottom of Big Bertha. His eyes turned black, shooting dark beams at the hole. Countless bubbles appeared around the dark beams as the beams vaporized the water in an instant. Deep orange lines appeared in the black hole everywhere the dark beams touched. Michael cut a 3-meter-long and 2-meter-wide piece of hole and took out a tubular pipe from his space ring. The silver metal pipe perfectly fitted into the hole Michael had just carved out. After placing the pipe into the hole, Michael closed the hole once again with the wood and swam to the other side to repeat the same process. Michael spent the next 15 minutes moving along with the ship and fitting Big Bertha with the torpedo gun. Now that he had finished installing the guns, Big Bertha had 2 unique shots, the mortar and the torpedoes. Compared to the mortar, the torpedo had 5 times the range. Plus, when aiming at the target using the mortar, it created a red spotlight which was called the Red Death by the Ithlan people. Contrary to the mortar, the torpedo had no indicators visible to the enemies. Any ship that was unfortunate enough to meet the torpedo would get obliterated without even knowing what hit them. This made the torpedoes the perfect weapon to use against the ghost ships. Back on the upper deck, Shorty and some of the crew kept staring into the ocean, wondering how in the hell the Dark Lord was staying in the water for so long. "Hey look," the pirate next to Shorty pointed at the horizon, where Shorty noticed a lone ship. "Wait for the Dark Lord's orders," Corey shouted when she saw the crew agitating to man the cannons and bombard the ghost ship to pieces. Even Corey had a difficult time rotating the rudder instead of firing the mortar. However, the Dark Queen ordered them to stay calm and let the ghost ship attack them from a safe distance. If what Gaia learned about these ghost ships were true, they wouldn't dare to enter into close combat with Big Bertha. They knew about the Red Death. Therefore, they would try to hit and run while keeping themselves out of the mortar's range. As they were sailing toward the ghost ship, Michael shot out of the water and landed right beside Corey. "Put these on." Michael handed over black goggles to Gaia and asked her to wear them. Okay, Gaia had no idea what it was, but she wore them as everything around her dimmed due to the black glass. Then, Michael gave her a conical wooden piece with a button on top. Gaia grabbed the wood and placed her thumb on the button. Time for some payback. Michael cracked his neck, looking at the ghost ship in the distance. Chapter 856 Torpedo in Action. Gaia gawked around the calm sea with the goggles on her eyes. At first, everything darkened, but soon, a red appeared before her sight. "What is this red dot?" Gaia raised her hand, trying to touch the virtual dot. "That's how you aim the torpedoes. They will hit wherever you put the red dot and push the button. This button is just a temporary measure. I will build a trigger in the rudder later," said Michael. Of course, Michael himself could have worn the goggles and fired the torpedoes. The reason he chose not to was he had other plans. To be precise, a backup plan in case the ghost ship crew tried to kill themselves before they could apprehend them. As far as Michael was concerned, this facade had gone long enough. It was time he weeded out his enemies one by one. "I have to adjust myself to this." Gaia stepped away from the rudder and joined Michael on the ship's front. Michael's long coat and hair fluttered in the wind as he stood there with his hands tufted into his pockets. Everyone on the ship had their gazes fixated on the ghost ship. Since the Dark Lord himself was with them, the crew's morale was sky high. Excitement coursed through their veins as they waited for the ghost ship to get closer. The closer they got to the ghost ship, the more excited everyone felt, especially Shorty, who couldn't wait to put the Olympus and the spell he had learned recently to use. The cannon crew was on the verge of lighting the fuse and bombarding the ghost ship. However, the ghost ship was still out of their range. Suddenly, they all heard a strange cry in the air. Michael recognized the sound. This was the same cry he heard when Fairbank and his ship were attacked. "They have noticed us," said Michael. "Don't attack them until I say so," Michael said before diving back into the sea. After Michael disappeared into the ocean, Gaia returned to Corey at the helm. To Gaia's surprise, the ghost ship halted sailing toward them just outside the mortar's firing range. It was like the ghost ship crew knew exactly how far the mortar could hit them. So they had done their homework, Gaia muttered under her breath. "What are they doing?" Cor asked as she saw the ghost ship slowly turning around. They want to stay outside the mortar's firing range, Gaia said. Should we catch up to them? Asked Corey, but Gaia shook her head. If we rush them, they might escape. I have a feeling their ship is faster than ours, Gaia said, walking to the rails. She leaned on the rails and watched the ghost ship without batting an eye. The red dot in her sight was right on the ship. If she wanted, she could fire the torpedoes. However, she had to wait for Michael's order. Meanwhile, inside the sea, Michael soared through the deep sea toward the ghost ship. He dived deeper into the ocean and used the lightning dash to increase his speed. In a few moments, he vaguely saw the ghost ship's dark shadow in the near distance. As he moved closer, he noticed strange ripples under the ghost ship. He closed his eyes and focused on the surroundings. A strange noise, a rhythmic pulse, reached his ears. The ghost ship was creating some kind of pulse around it. Because Michael was a resident of Earth, he was familiar with the sonar technology ships used to detect things underwater. To be honest, Michael was surprised and couldn't even believe the ship was using something similar to sonar. But the energy pulses he felt were definitely some kind of detection system. Everything made sense to Michael when he thought about it. If the ghost ship didn't have a way to detect hostiles under the water, one could swim underwater and catch them off guard, just like he was planning to do. There were some runes and arrays to achieve the same in Cultivation continents. Considering the southern continent was inside the void line, runes and arrays wouldn't work here. Hence, someone had to build a new device to achieve the same effects. Michael was surprised that someone who wasn't him had actually managed to do so. System, scan the ship, Michael ordered the system. He needed to be sure. The system requires 10,000 badass points to scan the ship. Go for it, Michael confirmed. While the system's invisible rays were scanning the ship, Michael moved backward from the ghost ship. He didn't want the pulses to detect him. No matter what contraptions they used, today, he would start dismantling this unknown enemy. His enemies had mistaken his patience for a lack of action. The system can confirm the host's suspicion. The ghost ship has indeed a device that mimics sonar pulses to detect hostile activity underwater in a 10-meter radius. A powerful bolt of lightning to the hull could disrupt the device. As Michael was contemplating whether he should disrupt the device or not, he heard the cannons crackling inside the hull. The very next moment, the cannons exploded, sending a volley of flaming cannonballs toward Big Bertha. Michael was pushed back for a few meters by the shock wave that traveled around the ghost ship. Michael quickly turned on the thermal vision and turned in the direction of Big Bertha. Once again, the ghost ship surprised Michael with its cannon gun range. After he heard the explosion, Michael formed a bubble around his head and contacted Gaia through the earpiece. "Are you hit?" Michael asked Gaia. Michael heard Shorty and the crew shouting and cursing the ghost ship. It took Gaia a few seconds to respond to him. "How in the fuck are they hitting us from this far? Where are you?" "I am losing my fucking patience here," Gaia roared in pure hatred toward the ghost ship. Her thumb was itching to press the button and fire the torpedoes. "Fire the cannons and pretend you are putting up a fight. Let them think they have the upper hand," said Michael. No one in the ghost ship knew Michael was watching them from below. Having no idea, they kept bombarding Big Bertha. Michael didn't worry about his ship because it was built to withstand huge amounts of damage. It would take two man-o-wars to attack Big Bertha from both sides at the same time to cripple her down. Surprisingly, the ghost ship's cannons had both range and power. On top of that, the reload time was way shorter than Michael had anticipated. After the third volley of cannon fire, Gaia contacted Michael. "We are taking some damage, human." "Anytime now," said Gaia. Michael noticed the ghost ship slowly sailing toward Big Bertha. Now that they had successfully damaged Big Bertha, the ghost ship crew had gotten more courageous. As Michael ordered, Big Bertha fired all her cannons, but none of the cannonballs could reach the ghost ship. For a few minutes, the roars of both ships echoed through the calm sea. As they continued the naval battle, the air reeked of gunpowder and burnt wood. From an outsider's perspective, Big Bertha was losing the battle because she caused no damage to the ghost ship while the latter bombarded Big Bertha with each round of fire. When the ghost ship fired the cannons for the fourth time, Michael clenched his fist as lightning bolts appeared and crackled around his wrists. He waited for the cannons to stop spitting out cannonballs. With lightning bolts crackling around his wrist, Michael followed behind the ghost ship. Gaia, Michael contacted Gaia. Do the honor, Michael snickered. Finally, Gaia was elated to hear Michael's order. On Big Bertha's upper deck, Gaia stood up from the cover and strolled toward the edge of the ship. Wooden splinters flew everywhere as the cannons on each side let out thick clouds of smoke after firing. Despite the chaos, Gaia stood firm and raised the button. Say hello to this, bitch. Gaia pressed the button as the entire ship trembled for a moment. Except for Gaia, none of the crew were aware of the new weapon Michael installed in Big Bertha. She creased her sword-like brows as she saw no smoke or fire. In fact, nothing happened for a few minutes. My lady, Short crouched toward Gaia and pulled her sleeves. You should duck down. They are preparing to fire again, Shorty warned Gaia. Boom. Suddenly, they heard a clap of thunder rumbling in the distance, and boom, the ghost ship's left half exploded to bits and pieces. Michael's crew was completely stunned. If Gaia didn't know about the torpedoes, she would have thought the gunpowder barrel stored inside the ghost ship had caught fire somehow and exploded from within. The torpedo obliterated the ghost ship and turned its one half into charcoal wood. Hell yeah! Shorty bounced up and down in pure joy. But Gaia wasn't as happy as the crew. Instead, she focused on the calm sea around the burning ghost ship. Any time now, she mumbled under her breath. As she expected, Michael shot out of the water like a whale on drugs and landed straight beside the ghost ship's captain. The crew atop the ghost ship was in chaos. They ran around like headless chickens in their weird gray robes. When Michael landed on their ship, they were completely caught off guard. The man in front of the rudder reached for his sword, only to get stabbed in the neck with an injection. His body froze as he fell down on the deck. Then, Michael turned his focus to the rest. The moment Michael's gaze swept across the deck, an invisible force snuffed out the flames and darkened the ship. Everything turned dead silent for a few moments. The only sound they heard at that time was the lightning bolts crackling around Michael's wrist. The surviving crew immediately reached out for the dagger dangling on their waist. According to Corey, they used this dagger to cut their throats to avoid being captured. As the crew reached for the dagger, Michael simply raised his hand, sending a couple of wind blades toward them. The next moment, several heads flew in the air as blood sprayed out of headless bodies. From the beginning, Michael had no plans to take everyone hostage but one, the captain. As for the others, they could go to hell and wait for the others. Chapter 857. Drawing the Dark Lord's attention in a blink of an eye, Michael removed their heads clean off. Blood was everywhere as some of the headless bodies stammered around the deck before collapsing down into the water or to the floor. The half of the ship Michael stood on was slowly sinking into the water. He grabbed the captain by his collar and dragged him down the stairs and into the captain's cabin. Although Michael's instincts told him that he wouldn't find a thing inside, he still wanted to make sure before the ship completely sank into the water. Michael turned the knob, but the door didn't even bulge. Without a second thought, Michael kicked the door as it crumbled down like a withered piece of wood. When the door was broken down by Michael, an empty dark room with a table and a few chairs welcomed him. For a captain's cabin, it was completely empty, without a single parchment or a piece of paper except for the Mao on the table. Michael strolled toward the table, dragging the ghost ship captain. The floor creaked as Michael felt the ship tilting to a side. He quickly ascended to the air to keep himself balanced. The salt water rapidly made its way to the cabin through the cracks, speeding up the sinking process. Michael quickly grabbed the map on the table and flew out through the door. But before he flew away from the sinking ship, Michael hovered toward the main sailing pole that slowly tilted to the side and was on the verge of completely falling down. He grabbed a silver box attached to it. The box had a handle on top and was engraved with numerous runes and designs. With the box and the ghost ship captain, Michael flew straight to Big Bertha. Suddenly, Michael stopped in mid-air. Gaia felt something was wrong when she saw him suddenly stop flying, so she came to his side. "Take him and this box to the castle." Michael's voice had a bit of seriousness. Hence, Gaia didn't ask him any further questions at the moment and took out a teleportation scroll from her space ring. She then grabbed the ghost ship captain by his collar and the box and activated the teleportation scroll. As Gaia vanished into thin air, something flew straight toward Michael. It was an arrow big enough to impale a dragon. The arrow was at least 6 meters long and as thick as an average man's hand. When it was just a few inches away from his head, Michael caught the arrow as another arrow shot out of him from above. Michael caught the second arrow as easily as he caught the first one. When the third one soared through the air toward him, Michael's eyes turned pitch black before dark beams shot out and burnt the arrow to oblivion. Then, Michael rose above the clouds at full speed, leaving an afterimage of himself that lasted for a few moments. Michael flew through the cluster of white clouds and found himself floating in a blue sky. Below him, the clouds stretched as far as one could see like a floor made of white cotton candy. Then, another arrow shot out from the clouds, only to get obliterated by Michael's dark beams. Michael indeed noticed these arrows obliterating Fairbank's attempt to escape the battle via the mirror. Even when Michael was underwater, he scanned for the second ship but found none. Hence, Michael was led to believe the second ship or the thing responsible for the arrows left the area, out of his environmental scanning range. To be honest, Michael was surprised when he suddenly sensed something above him. Floating above the clouds, Michael activated his thermal vision and finally saw a ship the size of a typical fishing boat hovering in the air with a couple of men atop. They were using a giant ballista to fire these big arrows. This was another freaky invention he saw today. Not that the ballista itself surprised Michael, but the fact someone had built it to fire arrows from a mile afar surprised him. For him, the ballista or the sonar wouldn't be a problem at all. The same couldn't be said for his army. With 100 or so ballistas like this, one could take on an army and completely obliterate them. He wanted to find the root of this problem before it grew into a giant headache for him and his army, especially if they could fly above the ground and target the army on the ground. Michael cast the lightning dash spell, flew straight to the flying ship, and saw 2 men dressed in white fur coats and metal armor operating the ballista. With Michael's black robes, he stood out among the white clouds. The 2 of them were stunned to see the Dark Lord up close. As soon as they saw him, they reached for the daggers to cut their throats. They didn't even try to fight the Dark Lord because they knew there was no point in fighting him. Michael was disappointed to see them try to kill themselves. Without giving them the pleasure of a quick death, Michael dashed at them and landed right beside them in a blink of an eye. "Nice ballista," said Michael before grabbing their throats. He looked at the daggers in their hands as dark beams shot out of his hands and cut off their wrists. Blood sprayed out of their wrists. Still, they didn't cry or shout. Instead, all Michael heard was muffled groans. He couldn't see their faces through the conical mask they wore, resembling a Halloween ghost costume. "Let me see your pretty faces." Michael headbutted one guy in the face and put him down. Then, he pulled out the mask from the other one. An elf. Michael was surprised to see the pointy ears of the man. At that time, the one who was knocked down stood up back to his feet. The man tried to stop Michael from removing his mask, but Michael was too fast for the man to react in time. Michael expected to see an elf behind the mask, but to his surprise, the man behind the mask was a beast man. His face was completely covered in fur and resembled a puma. An elf and a beast man working together. "Now I have seen it all," Michael snickered. Michael's hold around their throats tightened as he expected them to scream. Once again, they only groaned and didn't even utter a word. While Michael was manhandling the elf and the beast man, he looked over his shoulder to see Gaia flying toward him. When she saw the scene, her brows arched up. Who are these clowns, and what is this thing? Gaia floated to the ballista and stared at it curiously. She was more curious about the ballista than the elf and the beast man. As far as she could tell, they were dead men. This would be a good time for you two to say something, said Michael. Thursday, instead of talking, the elf spat out. When the blob of saliva was just a few inches away from reaching Michael's face, Gaia put her palm between the spit and Michael's face. The blob of saliva hit her palm. The next thing the elf remembered was a sharp pain in his face. Michael heard a sickening crunch and saw the bones sticking out of the elf's nose. She snatched the elf from Michael's hand and threw him overboard. Even after seeing Gaia throw his buddy overboard, the beast man had no signs of fear or shock in his eyes. The beast man remained calm and collected while the elf soared through the clouds and headed straight for the ocean. They were at least 12 kilometers high from the sea. So the elf had no chance of surviving the fall despite the sea below. The moment the elf's body hit the ocean, his bones would shatter, and his internal organs would become a mess. Do you hear him screaming? Michael asked Gaia, although he knew the answer very well. For a moment, Gaia was confused by his question. But when she thought about it, it felt weird to Gaia. Any sane person would have screamed by now or at least let out some sound. Yet the elf uttered no word. Gaia jumped down from the ship to find out why the elf wasn't screaming. Michael, on the other hand, went with a simple approach. He forced open the beast man's mouth. To his surprise, Michael saw no tongue inside the beast man's mouth. He was not an expert in beast men anatomy, but he was pretty sure they had tongues. Did the cat get your tongue? Michael joked. Jokes aside, Michael had a bad feeling in his guts. Whatever group these guys belonged to, they had powerful weapons, training to control their emotions, and soldiers with no tongue. The latter made sure that even if they were caught somehow, they wouldn't be able to utter a word. After seeing no tongue inside his mouth, Michael couldn't help thinking about whether the ghost ship captain was the same or not. In case he didn't have a tongue, there was no point in interrogating him. A soldier who was willing to lose their tongue and kill themselves wouldn't give out the secrets of their employers. The beast man squirmed and even tried to bite Michael. His eyes were filled with intense hatred toward Michael. Meanwhile, Gaia returned to the ship with the elf in her hand. The elf's golden hair was a mess, and he looked flustered after almost falling to his death. The elf's mind may have been resistant to fear, but his body acted differently to the fall. Put them in another cell, said Michael, taking out a syringe filled with gray liquid. He injected the paralyzer into the beast man's neck and did the same to the elf. The injection paralyzed both the elf and the beast man, so they would not be able to kill themselves in the cell. Afterward, Michael teleported the prisoners and the ballista. Before teleporting, he destroyed the flying ship to pieces with a ring of fire. By the time Michael left the sea, the ghost ship completely sank into the water, and Big Bertha was on her way to Corey's island for repair. As for Michael, he had 3 prisoners to interrogate, although 2 of them had no way of speaking. Chapter 858H for Hammond. Previous chapter. Back in the castle, Michael stood outside a room with the glass between him and the prisoners. Gaia put all 3 prisoners in the same room and tied them in a chair. Her white robes were drenched in blood. The blood wasn't hers but the prisoners'. Gaia showed them no mercy. The ground beneath them was littered with nails, teeth, pieces of flesh, and blood. Unfortunately, no matter how many ribs she broke, nails she pulled out, and teeth she knocked out, the prisoners didn't agree to give them information by writing. After 3 hours of non-stop torture, Gaia grew tired of it and stormed out of the room. I hate to say it, Michael, but they are not going to break, said Gaia. Anyone can be broken, Gaia. What irks me is even if we break them, I don't think they'll have something valuable to share. Someone with brains and resources is pulling the strings behind the scene. If what I've seen told me anything, it's that their employer doesn't make rookie mistakes. They pulled out their tongues to keep them from talking. The ballista might reveal more things than these guys, so what should we do with them? Asked Gaia. Whoever is behind this, we should send them a message. Michael turned around and headed toward the door. Before turning the knob, Michael looked over his shoulder at Gaia. In blood, then, Michael left the room, leaving Gaia to deal with the three. Since the interrogation had borne no fruit, Michael's next destination was the portal hall where they put the ballista. By the time Michael arrived at the hall, no one was there. Gaia put the ballista near the portal and Elliot's work table. The sight of a familiar weapon such as this reminded Michael of medieval war times on Earth. I wonder who built this, Michael muttered to himself. Deep down, he felt there was a connection between the ballista and the creator of the Death Kiss crossbows. Otherwise, it would be a damn phenomenon to have two geniuses capable of building mass destruction at the same time. The first thing Michael noticed about the ballista was the wood they used to build it. Despite how big it looked, the ballista was extremely light. The reason was the wood, which was sturdy yet light in weight. Michael walked around the big ballista, studying every inch of it. Where did they get this wood? Michael asked himself. The wood didn't seem like a common one. So if he could track down its origin, he knew he might be able to identify the person behind the recent attacks on his pirate crew. If Michael hadn't seen the sonar pulses and the ballista, he would have let his subordinates figure it out. After seeing them, however, he knew this was a task for him. The ballista could simply fire out arrows the size between 6 to 8 feet in length, and the weapon itself had the overall size of a fully grown elephant. While he was studying the ballista, Nightmare and Vidora flew into the room. They almost crashed into the ballista when they saw Michael standing beside it. Fortunately, Nightmare was not at his true grown size. If that were the case, the ballista would have been crushed into pieces by him. Can't you play outside? Michael asked as Vidora landed on his shoulder and Nightmare landed on top of the ballista. They are too much of chicken to fly through the storm, Nightmare chuckled. Who do you call a chicken, shithead? Iag snapped. Quit messing with her, Nightmare. Sarba tried to defuse the situation as always. If you are going to fight, take it outside. I have something important to do, said Michael. He had no interest in meddling with their sibling quarreling. Finally, Vidora and Nightmare halted their bickering for a moment and turned their focus to the ballista. Oh yeah. I heard you caught the sons of butchers who were attacking our pirates, said Iag. Caught one of them. But they are not talking, Michael shrugged. Why not? I bet we can make them talk, Iag snickered. You can't, Michael said as he squatted before the ballista and looked at its bottom. As he expected, there were countless gears and mechanisms built under. Although Michael knew he could have built a ballista with more efficiency and power, the one before him did surprise him. Whoever built the ballista must be a once-in-lifetime genius. Usually, the cultivators tended to be on the dumb side as they always preferred to solve problems with spells and murders. So they rarely had to use their brains. What if we did? Sarba tried to stop Iag from betting against Michael because he felt something was amiss. However, their sister was hot-headed and had already hatched a plan to get something out of their bet. You can ask me anything, Michael didn't even turn around as he casually said. Just sending them away would be a win for Michael. You better keep your word then, Iag proudly said before flapping her wings. Having no choice, Sarba and Kane joined her in her quest to make the prisoners talk. After Vidora left the hall, Nightmare dropped down to the ground, landing beside Michael. They aren't dead, right? Asked Nightmare. Nope, Michael shook his head. They just don't have tongues. For a moment, Nightmare had neither an expression nor a word. But when he imagined Iag's face when they realized the prisoners had no tongues, Nightmare broke into laughter. It took Nightmare a brief moment to stop laughing and turn his gaze back to Michael, who seemed completely focused on the ballista. "You need any help?" "What are you looking for?" asked Nightmare. "Creators leave their mark on the thing they created. It's like a signature. So I am hoping to find one left behind, whoever built this," said Michael. Nightmare frowned as he raised his leg and placed it on the crescent-shaped handle. "Do you mean something like this?" Michael raised his head and took a closer look at the handle. However, he saw nothing but plain wood. "I don't see anything," said Michael. Nightmare was surprised because he could see a symbol resembling the letter H dimly glistening on the handle. "Don't you see the glow on the handle?" "Take a closer look." Nightmare rubbed the symbol. Still, Michael saw nothing. Michael rubbed his chin as he realized the mark may be invisible to the naked eye. Luckily, Michael had various visions as he switched to the thermal vision first. The result disappointed Michael as he saw no symbol like Nightmare suggested. So Michael switched to another vision and saw nothing. One by one, Michael used all of his vision, yet the result was the same. Michael knew dragons had a special vision that enabled them to see the world from a different view. Unfortunately, there was no potion or technique to mimic their sight. Therefore, Michael had to rely on Nightmare completely. However, that didn't mean Michael had no way of seeing the symbol. He quickly took out a parchment, an ink bottle, and a platter. Under Nightmare's curious gaze, Michael poured the ink onto the platter. "Draw me what you see on the parchment," said Michael. "Nice idea," Nightmare nodded as he dipped his claw into the ink. Michael watched Nightmare slowly draw the symbol on the parchment. Done, Nightmare surprised Michael with his drawing skills. To be honest, Nightmare seemed like a better painter than Michael himself. When Nightmare lifted his leg off the parchment, Michael saw a symbol resembling the letter H. Michael tilted his head as he took the parchment in his hand. The H on the parchment looked exactly the same as the symbol Hammond engraved on his inventions. Of course, Michael didn't know any of this, just like Hammond didn't know the Dark Lord was staring at his symbol. In fact, Hammond didn't even know someone had used his invention to attack the Dark Lord's army. As Michael was staring at the parchment, Ricky entered the hall carrying a golden scroll in his hand. "My lord," Ricky bowed toward Michael and handed over the scroll to Michael. "We received this via an eagle," said Ricky as Michael opened the scroll. Nightmare flapped his wings once and leaped onto Michael's shoulder to have a better view of the scroll. Thanks to Gaia, who taught him how to read, Nightmare could read everything on the scroll. "I will wait for you at the same place we met before. Meet me at dawn tomorrow," Nightmare slowly read the words. Unlike Nightmare, Michael recognized the handwriting as soon as he laid eyes on the scroll. To be honest, he was waiting for a scroll from the Empress. He had a feeling she wanted to talk about the dwarves and their mass-destructive weapons. One way or another, the Empress problem got solved. She wanted the weapons gone, and Noah made sure of that. But Michael had a feeling the destruction of the weapon and the prototype was not the end but only the beginning. "You can leave," Michael dismissed Ricky and turned his gaze back to the ballista. "They want to play with toys," Michael muttered as he walked around the ballista. The images of Fairbank and his crew's death flashed across Michael's mind. He may have not known them personally, but they all served him loyally. It was his responsibility to avenge them. No matter what, Michael wouldn't rest until he made whoever initiated the plan to attack them pay with their lives. "I will show the toys I have," Michael snickered. His mind always began to craft new weapons to build, but first, he had to send a message to whoever built the ballista and decided to use it against him. The next day when the sun rose, the entire continent of Azer was in shock. But it wasn't Michael's intention to terrorize the Azer continent. Instead, he wanted everyone in Elon to know what would happen if they dared to go against the Dark Lord. Michael particularly wanted the news to reach Noah's home, the Winston Manor, who was preparing for the baby shower. Unknown to them, the god of time and space was planning to crash their party. Chapter 859. The man behind the inventions. Previous chapter. Alicia and Norvin were on their way to Ithilien, at least where Ithilien was before Michael obliterated the entire island. The Guardian Guild had sealed everything around in a 5-mile radius with an array to prevent people from traveling to the radioactive area. Before the Guardians sealed the area under Noah's order, rogue cultivators and people dived into the ocean, hoping to find some treasures underneath. Some of them did find some valuables that fell into the water before Michael blasted the island. In the daytime, the area looked no different than the rest, but at night, one could see the glistening array around the area. The sea was calm, pulsing rhythmically and breathing with cadence. By the time Alicia and Norvin reached their destination, they were welcomed by a couple of guardians who were tasked with patrolling the area. These guardians' main task was to prevent people from treasure hunting in the water. Ever since they were assigned, nothing ever interesting happened. Some days, these guardians hoped for something to happen. Unfortunately for them, their prayers were answered by the Dark Lord himself. Guardian Captain Alicia, a blonde-haired youngster, bowed toward Alicia and nodded at Norvin, who sat atop Alicia's shoulders in his true form. "Where is it?" Alicia asked the Guardian. Fear and relief emerged on the Guardian's face at the same time. He motioned them to follow him as he ascended higher into the air. Then, the Guardian slowly flew forward until Alicia noticed something hanging from a couple of black balloons. The midnight black immediately reminded Alicia of the Dark Lord. Everyone in the world knew the Dark Lord was obsessed with the color black, which symbolized darkness. More guardians were hovering around the balloons while keeping a safe distance from them in case they exploded. They all turned around and heaved a sigh of relief when they saw Alicia and Norvin. From this moment onward, it was Alicia's problem. To be honest, they didn't want to deal with the balloons. Alicia noticed the intense fear in their eyes. Damn, Norvin's brows arched up as he saw the headless bodies hanging from the balloons. Their severed heads were placed in their hands. It was a message. The question was, who were these people? Guardian Captain, another red-haired girl, slowly hovered toward Gaia with a black skull in her hand. "We found this in one of the bodies," the girl said, handing the black skull to Alicia. "Black skull?" "The symbol of the Dark Lord," Norvin muttered as he confirmed that this was done by the Dark Lord and not by someone else. After what he did to Ithilien and Thusians, Norvin knew there was no one stupid enough to mimic the Dark Lord's actions. Trying to copy him was equal to signing their death warrants. The Guardians had records of copycats for every mass murderer ever walked the world. However, the only one with no copycats was the Dark Lord. Besides, the cruelty and the fear in the severed heads' eyes were a clear indication of who killed them. "When did you find them?" Alicia asked in a tone colder than her usual self. The Guardians shuddered. "This morning," answered the blonde-haired youngster. "What were you doing until someone entered this area and placed them right under your noses?" asked Alicia. Norvin had the same question running in his mind. The only explanation he could come up with was incompetence. As Alicia said, someone from the Dark Lord's army entered one of the most protected areas, placed balloons with bodies, and escaped the area without anyone noticing. Just imagining the sequence of events frustrated Norvin. Ever since the Dark Lord destroyed Ithilien and settled down in the Dark Ocean, the Guardian Guild was desperately looking for a win against him. His power and influence grew with each passing day as the people's trust in the guild lowered. Now if the newspapers got a whiff of this, Norvin knew the people would be more afraid of the Dark Lord than they would trust the Guardian Guild. The Guardians gawked at each other and lowered their heads. They had no explanation. Initially, one of them thought the Dark Lord teleported the balloons with the bodies here, but later they realized the array formed an anti-teleportation area around. In other words, no one would be able to teleport in or out of the area. As Norvin turned his gaze to the black skull in Alicia's hands, he noticed something in the skull's mouth. He dropped down to Alicia's hand and pulled out a piece of paper from the skull's mouth. Everyone turned their gaze toward Norvin and waited for him to read what was written on the piece of paper. "Better luck next time, clowns." P.S. Nice array. Norvin crushed the paper, gritting his teeth. While reading the words, Norvin couldn't help imagining the Dark Lord laughing at them. When Alicia heard the Dark Lord calling them clowns, she almost crushed the skull in her hand to pieces. On the other hand, the Guardians hoped she wouldn't vent her anger on them. Suddenly, the black skull in Alicia's hands trembled, letting out a strange whistling noise. The Guardians almost leaped back, expecting the skull to explode. If you found out who they were and their buddies, they'd be alive. The Guardians felt a chill hearing the Dark Queen's voice coming from the skull. After hearing the Dark Queen's voice, the Guardians looked more terrified. Alicia had a feeling that the Dark Queen herself came here to put these balloons and the bodies. One thing was certain for Alicia, the Dark Lord didn't know who these people were, and he tortured them to no avail. This made Alicia more curious about their identities. Well, take this from here. Alicia turned her gaze back to the Guardians. Be more competent next time, Alicia snickered before taking the bodies and leaving the area. For some reason, Norvin had a feeling that if they could unveil the mystery behind the bodies' identities, they might be able to gain an advantage over the Dark Lord. The following day started with nothing too dramatic like the previous day for Michael. Since the Empress wanted to meet him again at the exact location they had met before, Michael woke up early and headed to the Lone Mountain. As he was flying in the sky, the orange and yellow bright ball began to appear like the colors oranges, lemons, and grapefruit. The sun slowly rose higher and higher as the colors became more vibrant. The sky and water connected with each other, and the light struck across the water. With each passing second, the sun began to glow brighter and brighter, eliminating the darkness of the night. The sunrise made the water glisten while the birds began to fly out of their nests peacefully. Michael had a sense of gentleness and calm as the birds chirped and the wind breezed over him. By the time Michael reached the mountain, he had noticed the Empress was waiting for him with Balladur. Michael didn't expect the Empress to arrive at the location earlier than they had agreed. You are early as well, Empress Nithrol greeted Michael with the most beautiful smile that shined just as bright as the morning sun. Good morning, Empress, Michael greeted back the Empress and landed beside her. Then, the two of them stared at the rising sun in silence for a few moments. Michael eventually broke the silence. I assume you heard what happened at the Hontorum shipyard, and I assume you know the ones who destroyed the place were not elves but the Guardians. As Michael expected, the Empress knew what really went down, unlike the dwarves. The moment Michael read the news stating that the shipyard in Embercrest had a mysterious explosion and the dwarves were suspecting the elves for the explosion. Many believed the news because everyone in the world knew the hatred between the dwarves and the elves. However, Michael knew it was all bullshit. Even if Michael didn't know it was Noah who destroyed the prototype, he wouldn't have suspected the elves because it was too obvious. Who would have thought Noah Winston, the Supreme Guardian, was capable of such trickery? Michael said with a tinge of sarcasm in his voice. You were supposed to deal with the prototype and the weapons, Balladur interjected as the Empress raised her hand, stopping Balladur from speaking further. Michael slightly turned his head to see Balladur standing behind Nithrol. In case you haven't noticed, I am not working for you. I am working with you. Huge difference, ignore my unruly subordinate. Nithrol's eyes glistened with authority and fury. With a single glance, she made Balladur take a step back. Even Michael felt the overwhelming aura of a ruler around her. It's okay, Michael defused the situation. One or another, the weapon and the blueprints were dealt with. The one who built the weapon is with the Guardian now. So everything with the dwarves will go back to what it used to be, said Michael. The real brains behind the weapon and the prototype was a human. An orphan named Hammond, Nithrol, gave Michael something important in his hunt for the inventor. As soon as Michael heard the name, the image of Nightmare's drawing flashed across his eyes. H for Hammond, Michael said to himself. Erase everything we know about Hammond. I hope you will find it useful. With a flick of her wrist, Nithrol took out an elegantly rolled parchment from her space ring. Take this if you think he is a threat to both of us. As you said, you are working with me, not for me. Nithroel extended the scroll toward Michael as he took it from her without wasting a second. As far as he was concerned, Hammond was more of a threat to him and his army than he was to Nithroel. Deal with him however you see fit. I just do not want to see his toys threatening my empire in any way. Although Nithroel seemed calm and collected, Michael could see the hidden killing intent in her eyes. If this Hammond guy was within her reach, Michael doubted he would still be alive. Don't worry about him anymore. I will deal with him personally, Michael said with a murderous grin. Chapter 860 Assassination of Ethan I Previous chapter Silvery white moonlight sprinkled on the ground as the blue sky was dotted with countless small stars. The chaste moon sails like a silvery boat in the deep blue sea. The night's aroma pervaded the air, woven into a soft net, covering all the scenery inside. The gauze-like clouds floated in the sky, which seemed to hide the ethereal fairyland of its own. The distant sky was connected with the world, forming a beautiful scene of heaven and earth. The black and blue sky was like a piece of paper, and the stars were like beautiful flowers, like a sparkling lamp, lying quietly in this black and blue. Under the dazzling night sky, the baby shower for the soon-to-be mom of the second child, Catherine, finally arrived. This was one of the days when the Winston Manor outshined the starry sky itself. The Winston Manor and the compound around it glittered brightly like a magical land. The hustle and bustle of chatter, cheers of celebration, the tantalizing smell of warm stew, fry meat, and caramel desserts wafted the air. The Winston Manor emitted a golden glow. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was full of positive energy, love, and laughter. Multiple games were being played, special meals were being made, and tons of gifts were being opened by the mother-to-be, Catherine Winston. Every aspect of the baby shower was baby-themed. The decorations were things such as pacifiers, rattles, and bottles, and there was even a cake made in the shape of a baby in diapers. The cake was surrounded by cupcakes that had pacifiers on them, and every dessert was a lovely shade of blue because Catherine's favorite color was blue. Adorable baby books were being passed around and filled with positive notes and pieces of advice that experienced mothers felt would help prepare Catherine for when the baby came. Imelda was running around the main hall, supervising the works with Catherine's first baby in her arms. Catherine was the main star of the event as she sat on a throne forged and decorated by the finest blacksmiths in Elon, watching the joyous celebration before her. Her bloated belly was a symbol of love, happiness, and an upcoming blessing to her and the entire Winston family. As the lord of the family, Ethan spent no expense on the event. Every single aspect of the baby shower was led by the best of the bests. This joyous event drew every Winston under the same roof, except for one. While the cooks were preparing the feast, Ethan and Diana were inside the rooms, preparing their own gifts for Catherine and Andrews. Diana combed her striking golden hair standing before the mirror. Ethan saw the despair hiding deep within Diana's eyes in the reflection. She was better than hiding her true emotions, but Ethan knew her better than anyone to see what was inside her heart. Did you make sure the arrays are in place and the guards are on alert? Diana asked. Her voice was far from relaxed and sounded serious as hell. For God's sake, Diane, I personally checked everything. Nothing bad is gonna happen today. Will you please relax? Ethan walked behind Diana and placed his hands on her shoulder. He gently squeezed, reassuring her that nothing would happen today. I don't know, Ethan. I have a bad feeling about this. Diana's brows arched up as she slowly turned around. Look, Diane, Ethan cupped Diana's face and looked her in the eyes. Rowena and Noah are here. No one can do any harm to our family when they are here. I thought you'd be more worried that he wouldn't be here with all of us, as a family. Diana shook her head. It's better he isn't. The last time Catherine was pregnant, he threatened to kill her and the baby. Diana sighed. You know he didn't mean that, said Ethan. Of course, I know he didn't mean it, but we cannot take his side without revealing the truth. I just hope one day, we'll all celebrate something together, as a family. Diana's voice stuttered because, as far as she could tell, the chances of their happy family reunion were little to nothing. Still, Diana had hope and faith in a higher power. My lord, my lady, Samuel knocked on the door. Young Master Noah is home. Diana and Ethan felt a bit relieved and smiled when they heard Samuel. Well, be there in a minute, Ethan answered Samuel and sent him away. We should go. Diana nodded as she put a strand of hair hanging on her face behind her ear. The two of them left the room and headed to the main hall to join the rest of the family. Everyone in the hall turned their gazes toward the lord and lady of the family walking down the stairs together. They saw Sabrina, their youngest child, standing between Rowena and Noah. Looking at the three of them, Ethan and Diana imagined Michael standing behind them. Father, mother, the three of them bowed toward Diana and Ethan, showing their respect. After the three bowed, Andrews walked to Noah's side and greeted Diana and Ethan with an ear-to-ear grin. There you are. Imelda rushed to Diana's side with Andrew's boy in her hand. When she came to Diana's side, the boy reached out to Ethan. Bah, the boy mumbled as Ethan took the chubby little boy in his arms. My little minion likes me so much, huh? Ethan said in a playful voice while rubbing the boy's cuddly belly. How was your trip to the treacherous ocean? Diana asked Noah. Couldn't find what I was looking for. But I heard someone has lifted the curse from the princess. Noah emphasized the word someone as though he knew exactly who lifted the curse. At least someone was there to help the princess, Diana said with a gentle smile. Then, she walked toward Catherine with her children following her behind. Rowena remained calm as ever, looking around the hole. On the other hand, Sabrina's thoughts drifted off to a distance. I hope the price for the help was worth it, said Noah. The moment Noah laid his eyes on King Porter and the Queen, he knew they had struck a deal with the Dark Lord to cure their daughter. To be honest, Noah didn't blame the king or take action against the king for colluding with the Dark Lord, even though Noah could have. He just hoped the price for curing their daughter was worth it. Saving one's child is always worth any price, Noah. You will know this when something happens to your own, said Diana. Where is Samuel? Rowena asked Diana after looking around the hall for their butler. He went to Ice Fair to get something for me, Imelda answered Rowena from behind. I won't let anything happen to our family, mother, said Noah. Without uttering a word, Diana bent down, grabbed a handful of sandal paste, and smeared it on Catherine's cheeks. Praying for a safe and healthy delivery for both you and baby, Diana wished Catherine before walking out of the main hall to get some peace. Ever since she returned to her own self, Diana sought more privacy and some alone time. The crowd made her uneasy for some reason. As they exited the main hall, they stepped into Diana's garden. Except for a couple of guards, no one was in the garden as Diana ordered. The four of them peacefully strolled through the garden and settled around a stone table. You seem different, mother, Rowena said when Diana sat on the stone bench. So it wasn't just me who felt that way, Noah smiled. As they were gathered around the table, a couple of maids carried a silver platter with orange juice and placed the glasses on the table. Thank you, dear. Diana dismissed the maids as each picked up a glass to quench their thirst, except Sabrina. Something in your mind, Sabi? Diana asked, avoiding Rowena's remark about something different about her. Sabrina moved the glass back and forth without answering Diana. Sabrina, Rowena's voice made Sabrina snap back to reality. They all turned their gazes at Sabrina. Do you have something to tell us, Sabi? Asked Diana. Because Diana was busy tracking down people who tried to conspire against Noah and Michael behind their backs, she neglected her duties as a mother and the lady of the house. Thanks to Imelda, no one noticed Diana's absence and her neglect. The one who was affected more by her absence was Sabrina. Unlike Noah and Rowena, Sabrina spent most of her time cultivating in Winston Manor. Wherever she looked for Diana, she would be outside, murdering people. But to the members of Winston Manor, Diana was meditating in her room. "I had a bad dream last night." "That's all," said Sabrina. "What is the dream about?" Noah asked Sabrina. Har. Just as Sabrina was about to tell them about her dream, Imelda's scream resonated from the main hall. Noah immediately stood up, knocking out the glasses in the process. Diana's instinct kicked in as she moved with lightning speed to catch all the glasses before they could hit the ground and shatter into pieces. But Noah and Sabrina didn't notice this as they dashed into the main hall. Rowena, on the other hand, glanced at Diana for a moment before disappearing from the garden. In a blink of an eye, Rowena appeared in the main hall right beside Catherine. As soon as Noah stepped into the hall, his heart skipped a beat. "Father!" Sabrina screamed, looking at Ethan. He was on the ground, holding his gut as blood oozed through his hand. Everyone was stunned and speechless. Noah's body began to shiver as he sat beside his father and raised his head to place it on his lap. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Noah took out a healing potion. He poured the potion into Ethan's mouth without asking any questions. The sudden explosion of killing intent around Rowena made everyone in the hall collapse, including Catherine. Rowena's gaze swept across the hall to find whoever was responsible for her father's state and found a human-sized hole in the cake they bought for Catherine. Whoever stabbed Ethan was hiding inside the cake until he or she ambushed Ethan. "Ethan," Rowena turned her gaze at Diana, who stammered toward Ethan and dropped to her knees before him. Her eyes turned red as tears rolled out. "Father," Noah emptied the healing potion, but the wound did not close up as he desperately hoped. Diana's mouth dried as she saw green veins running through Ethan's neck like spider webs. "It's not working," Noah clenched his fist as he took out another healing potion and tried to force it into Ethan's mouth. For the first time in his life, Noah couldn't think straight. His mind went completely blank seeing his father on the verge of death. "He's cursed," Sabrina mumbled. Chapter 861 Assassination of Ethan 2 Previous chapter. A few moments ago, after Diana took the children outside to her garden, Ethan spent his time socializing with all the guests and giving his blessing to Catherine. Andrew's son was still in his arms and refused to leave. The little boy loved Ethan more than he loved his parents. "Come on, Keith. Come to Papa." Andrews tried to take the boy away from Ethan as he noticed the royal carriage of King Porter parked outside. Soon, the sound of heavy boots and metal armor clanking grew louder and louder as King Porter entered the hall with his loyal soldiers leading the way. After the royal guards escorted Porter inside, they bowed and joined the royal guards of other nations, leaving their kings to socialize with the others. As soon as King Porter arrived at the hall, King Crawford Bredia, Catherine's father, welcomed his fellow king with a broad grin. The two of them embraced each other as a sign of respect and firmly shook each other's hands. "I am so glad you could make it, Porter," King Bredia said, still keeping Porter's hand in his. It had been a year since Porter saw Bredia, who looked much younger and seeped with vigor. The reason for King Bredia's transformation was Andrews and Catherine. Although he was still the king of Bredia, Andrews and Catherine took care of most things. Under their rule, Kingdom Bredia prospered despite the monstrous growth of Bradford under the rule of the Sunrise sect. The fact that the Dark Lord hailed from the Sunrise sect and he loved Rivertown like it was his own made Bradford untouchable. Noah may have shut down the Majestic and Hades, which used to be the pillars of the economy in Bradford, yet Claire found new means of revenue through farming and trading. Like wheat gets the water poured for the crop, Kingdom Bredia benefited from the trade routes Claire created. Even merchants from other continents visited Rivertown and Bradford to trade and exchange gifts with the most powerful sect in the Elon continent. "How is Princess Chanel?" King Bredia asked Porter. "She is doing perfectly fine, thanks to the gods," said Porter and quickly turned his gaze toward Ethan to avoid further questions regarding Chanel and her curse. King Porter was standing in the Holy Maiden and Supreme Guardian's home, and the last thing he wanted to talk about was something related to the Dark Lord. "Lord Ethan," Porter greeted Ethan, "the little one, Porter couldn't help pinching baby Keith's chubby cheeks. "King Porter, didn't we tell you to come with your family?" "Where is Queen Clarice and Princess Chanel?" asked Ethan. "I know, Lord Ethan." But Clarice had taken Chanel to her father's home. "Chanel is still not ready to venture outside the kingdom, I understand," Ethan patted Porter on the shoulder. As they were conversing, some of the representatives of royal land arrived at the baby shower and showered Catherine with lavish gifts. Even the Holy Church sent people to attend the event just to curry favor with the Holy Maiden and the Supreme Guardian. Almost every single noble family in the Elon continent attended the event regardless of their busy schedules. Since Diana was not the best when it came to socializing, Ethan met and greeted each and every guest while keeping Keith from crying out loud. While Ethan was attending to the guests, Natalia Winston went outside to receive the cake they had ordered from the Beast Kingdom in our continent. The Beast Men had some of the best cooks in the entire world, including 3 six-star chefs. Ethan had to call several favors to get this special cake from the Beast Men Kingdom. The cake was taller than Natalia herself and covered with a special box made of thin planks. "Take this inside," Natalia ordered the Winston Manor guards to take the cake inside. The guards rolled the box as gently as they could. At that moment, everyone thought the box contained a human-sized cake resembling Catherine. Finally, Ethan heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the golden wooden box. The moment the guards brought the cake inside, its fresh aroma and sweetness made everyone salivate for a piece. As Ethan vowed to himself, he brought nothing but the best to the baby shower. "Keep it close to Catherine," said Imelda. One by one, the guests who had newly arrived went to Catherine and smeared sandal paste on her face. The hall brimmed with joy and positive energy as Ethan forgot all of his problems and celebrated the baby shower with everyone else. Imelda smiled, looking at Ethan, laughing and joking around as he was used to before he learned everything about Diana's second son. Imelda wished they could stay like this forever. Although she was not cruel enough to say Dean didn't deserve a loving family, she didn't think the Dark Lord could have a happy ending after everything he had done. When Imelda went to the doorway to the garden, she saw Diana talking to her children. Imelda gawked at them for a moment and decided not to approach them. By the time she returned to Catherine's side, the soon-to-be mother tucked Imelda's sleeves. Catherine motioned Imelda to give her ears. "Can I get something to eat?" Catherine whispered into Imelda's ears. "Just wait for a few minutes, darling," Imelda gently kissed Catherine on top of her head. She looked around, noticing a few new faces approaching Catherine to give their blessings. Eventually, when everyone in the hall had done their part, Imelda gestured at the guards to open the box containing the cake. "Everyone, please gather around. We are going to cut the cake now," Imelda's voice swept across the hall, silencing the crowd. "Go and bring Diana and the others," Ethan ordered one of the maids before strolling toward Imelda. Keith played with Ethan's ears, trying to chew them. All the kings, nobles, and elders of various sects gathered around Catherine as Imelda waited for Diana to arrive. "They will be here." "Go on, open the box," Andrew said. Then, Imelda twisted the knob attached to the side of the box and watched the box sling open. A dim light appeared in the box, along with the sound of a baby's cry, before the wooden box crumbled into tiny pieces, revealing the cake inside. Catherine and the others were stunned to see the cake that looked exactly like Catherine. The Beastmen chefs poured their hearts and souls into the cake as they etched every single detail about Catherine into the cake. If it wasn't for the golden icing and cherries on top of the cake, one would have mistaken the cake for the real Catherine. "Here you go." Imelda picked up a knife with a golden bow tied around it and handed it over to Catherine. "Carve out a nice piece of yourself," the crowd chuckled, hearing Imelda's words. Catherine gawked around for a moment, searching for Diana and her children. "Where are they?" Ethan mumbled. He was about to step aside from the crowd when he saw the cake trembling. As a former adventurer, Ethan developed an ability to sense an imminent threat. For some reason, his instinct screamed at him as he pushed Catherine away from the cake. To everyone's shock, a black hand punched through the cake from within and tried to stab Ethan. Ethan immediately grabbed the hand, twisting it. Arg! Ethan heard a muffled groan. He put in enough strength to break the wrist, but the assassin ignored the pain as he dashed out of the cake, destroying it completely in the process. The assassin raised his other hand as an evil-looking dagger oozing dark red smoke appeared in his hand. He brought down the dagger at Ethan. Everything happened in a blink of an eye. Except for Ethan, no one reacted in time and called for the guards. They were too startled. Meanwhile, Ethan moved his body to the side, evading the dagger by an inch. He kicked the assassin in the chest to put some distance between them. Baby Keith was terrified of the dark-robed assassin and began to cry. Every fiber in Ethan's body prioritized keeping Keith safe over everything, including his own life. The assassin was extremely agile and noble. He leaped into the air and cast a spell as a bright light flashed across the room, blinding everyone. Ethan closed his eyes but covered Keith with both his hands and held him closer to his chest. Suddenly, Ethan felt a sharp pain in his stomach. Despite the excruciating pain, Ethan didn't let go of Keith. The assassin stabbed Ethan a couple of times until Ethan managed to grab the assassin's wrist and twist it. The dagger slipped off the assassin's hand as Ethan stomped the ground with enough force to make the dagger bounce up. Before the assassin could react, Ethan grabbed the dagger in one hand and stabbed the assassin in the shoulder. Ethan heard the assassin groan as the bright flash finally faded away. Hi. Imelda screamed when she snapped back to reality and saw Ethan collapse down to the ground. So much blood gushed out of Ethan's stomach, turning the floor beneath him wet and red. The assassin was nowhere to be found. When the guards rushed to Ethan's side, it was too late. Keith! Andrews and Catherine screamed out loud as Andrews plucked Keith from the ground and held him closer to his chest. Seeing Keith safe in Andrews' arms, Ethan heaved a sigh of relief. Search the area. King Bredia roared as he dashed toward Catherine. The Winston Manor guards immediately surrounded the family while the royal guards rushed to their master's side. Gg. Ethan tried to speak, yet no words escaped his mouth. The pain was too much to bear, as it felt like he was being eaten from the inside. He could feel his life force slowly leaving his body. Every breath he took made the pain worse. When he was in pain and realized he was dying, he only saw one thing before his eyes, his family. Dien. Ethan mumbled. If he was about to die, he wanted to see Diana one last time before he closed his eyes. Father! Sabrina pushed through the crowd and shouted when she saw Ethan. This was the dream she had last night. She saw her father die in her arms as she watched the light of life, leaving Ethan's eyes helplessly in her dream. Chapter 862, Assassination of Ethan 3. Noah sent all the nobles out, and to be honest, they didn't want to stick around any more than Noah wanted them to. Diana's body just froze as her mind went completely blank. The killing intent radiated from Diana surprised everyone. However, saving Ethan took priority over Diana's murderous aura. Sabrina squeezed Ethan's hands as tears rainbows down from her eyes. Father, Sabrina sobbed. On the other hand, Noah emptied the third bottle of healing potion into Ethan's mouth. King Porter and King Bredia couldn't help shivering. Considering their close relationship with the Winston family, they didn't leave as the others. The previously joyful atmosphere took a dark turn in a blink of an eye. The cake the assassin was hiding inside turned into a squishy mess. Everyone in the Winston family sat around Ethan and sobbed, praying for the gods to help Ethan. Most of them were still in shock at what just had transpired. After seeing the healing potion have no effect on Ethan, Rowena placed her hand on Ethan's stab wound. Among everyone in the hall, Rowena remained the calmest. Contrary to how she looked, Rowena burned with intense rage inside. She knew saving her father's life was more important than finding the assassin at that moment. Since the healing potion couldn't close the wound, Rowena summoned frost energy as a thick layer of ice started to cover the wound slowly. The ice on the wound stopped the bleeding and somewhat lessened Ethan's pain. "Why did you tell us he was cursed?" asked Rowena. This was the first time Rowena's hands trembled without her control. Her slender hands were drenched in Ethan's blood. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't cancel out the sobbing sounds. "Do something," Sabrina stuttered, looking at Noah and Rowena. If someone could save her father, it was one of her siblings. "Ethan," Diana sat beside Ethan's head and remained without uttering a word. Looking at Diana like this freaked the crap out of Imelda. "I saw father dying of curse in my dream. I didn't know how to tell you. I should have told everyone. It's my fault." Tears gushed out of Sabrina's eyes and rained down upon Ethan's chest. "Andrew," before Noah answered Sabrina, he turned his gaze toward Andrews. "Take your family and go to the shelter," Noah ordered Andrews. The Winston Manor had a secure vault built underground for the family members to seek shelter in case of natural disasters or wars. Only the core members of Winston's family knew how to access the shelter, and Andrews was one of them. No dash, Andrews refused to leave Ethan's side but was cut short by Rowena. "Go," Rowena interjected. Her cold murderous voice shook Andrews to the core. After hearing her, his legs automatically moved upstairs. Imelda saw Natalia trying to approach Diana, but she quickly stopped her little sister by her arms and sent her with Andrews. "I cannot leave him," Natalia shook her head. "This is not the time to argue, Natalia. Go with Andrews and stay there until I say otherwise." "Please," Imelda begged, tears running down her face. As much as Natalia wanted to stay with her big sisters, she knew there was nothing she could do to help Ethan. All she could do was pray to the gods for Ethan. "Uncle." Natalia and Imelda froze when they heard little Keith's first word out of his mouth. They all expected Keith's first word to be either mom or dad. But it was uncle instead of what the others expected. Little Keith proved that he loved Ethan as much as he loved Andrews and Catherine or more. What should have been a joyous occasion turned out to be such a miserable situation. No one could laugh or celebrate Keith's first word. Instead, Imelda and Natalia led Andrews and Catherine outside the main hall under the protection of Winston Manor guards. "We need to take him to my palace," Rowena said. "Let's go." Noah stood up, lifting Ethan in his arms. Diana stood up like a lifeless zombie and followed Noah behind. They headed for Rowena's room, where Rowena had a personal teleportation array to reach her flying castle. But when Noah was about to take a step outside the hall, Ethan's body shook as he began to cough of dark blood, almost the color of pitch black. "What's happening?" Porter Forbes asked as Noah halted his steps. "The curse is not letting him out of this hall," Diana spoke without any emotion. She sounded like a dead person. Just as she said, when Noah tried to step outside the hall, Ethan coughed up more blood. Noah immediately stepped away from the entrance as he didn't dare to play with his father's life. The green veins running through Ethan's neck reached his jaws. If not for the frost hindering the curse, the poisonous curse would have reached Ethan's head and ended his life. "We can't leave this hall," Noah said to Rowena through the lump formed in his throat. Every word took an effort to come out of his mouth. The sadness and anger rendered Noah's brain useless. He looked for his big sister's guidance. For a moment, Rowena closed her eyes as the others saw a strange light appear from her forehead and form a light beam. The light beam radiated a whistling noise and glowed bright enough to blind everyone. When Rowena opened her eyes, the light beam lost its glow as Bai Ning stepped out of the beam. The moment Bai Ning laid her eyes on Rowena, she was stunned by the scene before her. The air that should have smelled of freshly baked cake and sandal paste reeked of blood and evil energy. "Cure him," Rowena ordered Bai Ning. The old woman limped toward Ethan with her hunched back and cane in her hand. "What happened here, Holy Maiden?" Bai Ning's words sounded calm despite the bloody body of Ethan in Noah's arms. "Lift the curse first," Rowena coldly said instead of narrating the events that led to the current situation. To be honest, she had no idea what had happened while they were outside. If she was inside, she would have torn apart the assassin before he could have raised a finger against her father. Bai Ning unfettered no word as she placed her hand on Ethan's chest. As soon as Bai Ning touched Ethan, she felt a bolt of lightning running down her spine. The backlash almost knocked Bai Ning down to the ground. Noah saw the sweat beads forming on the old woman's face as she gritted her teeth as though she was enduring intense pain. While Bai Ning was trying to lift the curse, Rowena continued to apply frost on Ethan's face to prevent the blood from gushing out. She had to keep the blood loss in control until Bai Ning lifted the curse. "This curse is nothing like I've ever seen," Bai Ning mumbled. Her words snuffed out the little bit of hope Sabrina had for her father. Recently, everything she dreamed about began to happen in real life. The only person she shared this with was Ethan. However, he asked her to ignore and pay no mind to this phenomenon because Ethan didn't want Sabrina to become a freak of nature like her siblings. Instead, he wished Sabrina to have a normal life away from all the wars and hostility. Normal life may be just a wishful dream for her siblings, unlike Sabrina. However, Sabrina had started to develop powers that were beyond any mortal comprehension and joined her siblings as another freak of nature. If the word of her power to foresee the future escaped, the Sky Hall would swoop up Sabrina in the name of the greater good. They would groom Sabrina to be the next holy maiden after Rowena. Arg! Suddenly, a grayish mist shot out of Ethan's body and blasted Bai Ning away. The old woman flung in the air and hit the wall pretty hard before falling down. The ground beneath Noah cracked when he resisted the force that blasted away Bai Ning. When the old woman got back to her feet, her face looked pale like paper. "The curse," Rowena growled with intense killing intent in her eyes. The temperature in the room dropped by several degrees to the point everyone began to see their own breath in the air. Bai Ning shivered to even look Rowena in the eyes. However, the curse she felt terrified Bai Ning more than Rowena. One thing for certain, the curse radiated an energy that didn't belong to the mortal world. It was a miracle Ethan was able to resist the curse to this point. She even doubted whether Ethan was a mere mortal or someone special like Diana and her children, except Sabrina. I. Bai Ning stuttered. "Speak before I lose my patience," Rowena's thunderous voice swept across the hall, pushing the old woman several steps back. "The curse cannot be lifted, holy maiden." "I am sorry." As soon as Sabrina heard Bai Ning's words, she collapsed to the ground. A tear rolled out of King Bridia's eyes and Porter stood beside Bridia with his eyes glimmering with fear. When Chanel was cursed, more than one healer told him the same, but at the end, the Dark Lord was able to lift the cure in a few mere moments. So Porter knew there was still a chance that the Dark Lord would be able to do the same to Ethan. However, he didn't dare to utter the name of the Dark Lord in front of the Holy Maiden and the Supreme Guardian who vowed to take down the Dark Lord. Finally, the tears caged within Rowena's eyes escaped and trickled down on her rosy cheeks. For the first time in her life, Rowena shed tears, and when Noah saw the scene, his heart shattered into pieces. "It's okay," Ethan mumbled, shocking everyone around him. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at Diana. He tried to smile through the pain. "Father, Ethan," Noah gently placed Ethan on the floor as Diana grabbed both Ethan's hands. "I am not going to let you die. You hear me? You're gonna be alright," Diana said. Ethan tried to speak but he couldn't even open his mouth. While Ethan was struggling in pain, Diana bent down and kissed him on the forehead. Then, she turned her gaze toward Noah. "You know who to summon. Do it." Diana's voice completely changed from caring mother to a domineering warrior. "Rowena, if anyone has a problem with it, deal with them," Diana ordered Rowena as she nodded without asking her mother a question. Chapter 863, Noah meets Azazel. Noah gawked between his father and King Porter. When King Porter noticed Noah's gaze on him, his heart skipped a beat. King Bredia and Bai Ning frowned as Noah made his way to King Porter. Every fiber in Noah's body told him to find another way to cure his father. If he had enough time, he might come up with a way to lift the curse. But without the time and his mentor, who entered into a slumber, Noah couldn't come up with a way to save his father. Ever since he was a little kid, Ethan gave everything to Noah. His father was more of a best friend to him than a father. Noah couldn't even imagine a world without his father. Moreover, he knew his mother would break into pieces if he let Ethan die. If making a deal with the Dark Lord was the only way to save his father, Noah was willing to do it. His father's life was worth more than his principles. Your Majesty, Noah's voice broke as he looked King Porter in the eyes. I know what you did to save Princess Chanel. King Porter trembled, hearing the words coming out of Noah's mouth. I don't know what you're talking about, Noah, King Porter stuttered. It's not the time to cover up, Your Majesty. Noah slowly shook his head. I wouldn't ask you if I had the time to go to the Dark Ocean and meet him myself. But we don't have much time. So please, summon him, Noah pleaded with King Porter. When King Porter asked for help with the curse on Princess Chanel, Noah felt how powerful the curse was and went to the treacherous ocean, one of the most dangerous places in the world, to help her without worrying about his life. Although Noah returned empty-handed, King Porter wholeheartedly felt grateful toward Noah. No one would have ventured into the treacherous ocean to help the princess. Rowena didn't know what had happened with Princess Chanel. The only thing she knew was that King Porter might have something to help her father. However, Rowena didn't like to see her little brother begging for a measly king. She was on the verge of freezing King Porter to the neck and forcing him to reveal whatever Noah wanted him to. King Porter, King Bredia opened his mouth. If you have something to help Ethan, please give what Noah wants. You know Ethan would do it in a heartbeat, King Bredia said. He was oblivious to the fact that Noah wanted to summon the Dark Lord. Otherwise, King Bredia would have never spoken these words. He still had nightmares of the time Ghost ambushed the engagement gala and threatened to kill Catherine and the baby inside her. If you want me to beg no. When Noah tried to lower his head, King Porter grabbed his shoulder and shook his head. Once everyone said Princess Chanel couldn't be cured, King Porter felt weak and helpless despite his status as a king. Being a king didn't matter when he couldn't be a good father and save his daughter. At that time, King Porter would have given anything to have a tiny bit of hope to save Chanel, and Noah was the only man who gave him that hope. As long as he lived, Porter couldn't forget the sliver of hope Noah gave him. To be honest, King Porter didn't think he could forgive himself if he stood there and did nothing to help Noah. As a righteous king and a grateful man, he had to give the card the Dark Lord gave him. He just hoped the Dark Lord would accept the summon from the Supreme Guardian. He gave me this if I want to contact him again, King Porter said after taking a long deep breath. Then, he took out the black card with a skull embossed in from his space ring. Is that, the moment King Bredia saw the skull, his body shivered. He took a few steps back and almost tripped down on his robes. Pure fear and shock overwhelmed Bredia's senses as he began to see images of piles of bodies on the engagement gala before his eyes. The Dark Lord, who was known as Ghost, then single-handedly slaughtered almost every royal guard and beat him to a pulp on his own throne. I don't know how to summon him. Maybe you can figure it out. Ignoring King Bredia's tantrum, Porter handed over the card to Noah. Noah's hands shivered as he took the card from Porter's hand. Never in a million years, Noah thought, asking the Dark Lord for his help. But he didn't have a choice as the Dark Lord may be the only person who could lift the curse and save his father. Noah, the entire hall trembled as Bai Ning's shout swept across the area. The old woman dashed at Noah in a blink of an eye and snatched the card from his hand. How dare you think of summoning that evil creature? Bai Ning's blood boiled, thinking Noah was trying to summon the Dark Lord in front of her and the Holy Maiden. Ethan's life meant nothing compared to striking a deal with the Dark Lord. The mere thought of Noah considering asking the Dark Lord's help made Bai Ning's anger explode like a raging volcano. She wanted to strike down Noah and King Porter for colluding with the Dark Lord where they were standing. But first, Bai Ning wanted to destroy the card left behind by the Dark Lord. No! Sabrina shouted as Bai Ning clenched her fist to crush the card to pieces. Just as Bai Ning was about to crush the black card, a wave of bone-chilling frost blasted Bai Ning onto the wall behind her. The old woman collided with the wall and coughed up blood. Before her body could hit the ground, a stream of ice shot out of Rowena's blades and froze the old woman up to her neck. Noah quickly raised his hand as the card on the ground flew back into his hand. Holy Maiden, Bai Ning could neither raise her voice nor a finger against Rowena. In a blink of an eye, Rowena disappeared from Ethan's side and appeared before Bai Ning. You cannot let this happen, Bai Ning stuttered. If you breathe a word about any of this, Rowena's voice was cold and sharp as a dagger that pierced into Bai Ning's heart. I will freeze your body to the core and toss you into the deepest pits of hell. Fear took over Bai Ning's mind and prevented her from opening her mouth. The murderous intent she saw in Rowena's eyes was not a joke. Bai Ning's immortal stage cultivation wouldn't save her from the Holy Maiden's wrath. At the end of the day, Diana was not the only one with an ancient god's blood. After Bai Ning heard Rowena's threat, she closed her mouth. Summon him, Diana said to Noah, who held the card in his hand. Noah, stop, King Bredia rushed to Noah's side. Don't do this, Noah. You are the supreme guardian. What would the world think if they knew you asked for the Dark Lord's help? What would your teacher say? Will he approve of this? King Bredia fired questions, one after another. The Dark Lord was the last person he wanted under the same roof as his daughter and grandson. What if the Dark Lord decided to kill them all? What if he wanted to take his grandson away? What if he hadn't forgotten what he did and decided to seek revenge? So many questions wreaked havoc inside Bredia's mind. I don't care about anything. If seeking his help will save Father's life, that's what I would do, Noah said, slowly shaking his head. When Bredia tried to stop Noah, Rowena just turned her cold gaze toward him as he felt a cold chill running down his spine. Bredia took a step back in utter fear and stood in the corner, watching Noah summon the Dark Lord helplessly. Holding the card in his hand, Noah took a deep breath. He looked around the black card to figure out the way to contact the Dark Lord until he felt a strange tingling in his hand. He felt like the card was asking for a sliver of arch energy, and that's what exactly Noah did. He slowly injected the card with arch energy. For a moment, the card remained dormant, and then, it trembled. Black smoke slowly rose from the skull as the card floated above Noah's hand. Everyone turned their gazes at the card floating in midair. The black smoke permeating from the card slowly formed a mirror before them. As they were looking into the mirror, a man with wings sticking out of his back appeared. His eyes glowed like rubies. The man was dressed like a butler, with his hair neatly combed to the side and wearing black gloves. When he saw Noah, a strange smile formed on his handsome face instead of shock. Supreme Guardian Noah. What a pleasant surprise. It's my pleasure to meet you at last, the butler's voice sounded crisp and clear as he lowered his head. But his bow indicated amusement instead of respect. Even though Noah didn't see the man in person, he could feel the overwhelming power radiating from him. According to Noah's spies, the Dark Lord had a personal butler. They described him as the butler with demon wings. Judging by the look of the man before him, Noah realized he must be the butler they informed him about. I need to speak with Ghost, Noah bluntly said. I can see King Porter Forbes behind you. King Porter's mouth dried in fear as he saw the butler smiling at him. Rowena and Diana came to Noah's side and stood behind him. You must be the Holy Maiden and Lady Diana Winston. I am honored to meet you, my ladies, the butler bowed slightly as Rowena creased her brows. Call your master, demon," Rowena coldly said. The demon smiled, slightly surprised to see Rowena identifies his race accurately. Besides, she didn't seem shocked to see a demon in person, unlike Bai Ning, who had sweat beads forming on her forehead. "Forgive me for being blunt, my lady. But how do you expect the Dark Lord to answer your call when the clans you are in have sworn to kill him?" The demon butler asked Rowena. "I saved his life once. It's time he settles that debt," said Rowena. Chapter 864. Plan to destroy Noah's image. Azazel was surprised by Rowena's words and took a few moments to formulate a fitting response. He knew they must be in some blunder if they chose to contact the Dark Lord. Hence, Azazel wanted to gauge how desperate they were before informing the Dark Lord. And the Dark Lord will settle the debt in time. Unfortunately for you, Holy Maiden, he doesn't work for the Sky Hall. Rowena took a step forward and stood beside Noah. Her eyes glistened with cold murderous intent. "I give you 5 seconds to call Ghost," Rowena snarled as Azazel let out an amused smile. "And what would happen when your countdown reaches 6? Asked Azazel. "Nothing. But soon, you will see me in the dark ocean, bringing the entire might of Sky Hall to your doorstep. Your head will be the first one to roll down. Is threatening us the best way to ask for help, Holy Maiden?" Another voice appeared as they saw Azazel turn around and bow. The next moment, Noah and the others saw Gaia, the Dark Queen, stand before them in her dark suit of armor. "Azazel, we always settle our debt," Gaia looked over her shoulder and said to Azazel. Then, she turned her gaze back to Rowena and Noah. "You must be in some pretty desperate situation to ask for our help. Let's just say your clans have nothing to do with us. Why would we help you? What's in it for us?" Gaia rubbed her chin. "You said it yourself, you always settle your debt. My sister saved Ghost's life, and it's time he returns the favor," said Noah. "Forgive me for thinking this might be an elaborate trap to capture the Dark Lord, Noah. Your pretty wife tried that, and it didn't turn out well, did it? Now explain to me why I shouldn't think that way." "Because Ethan is dying," Diana stepped forward and answered Gaia instead of Rowena or Noah. When Gaia heard Diana, her brows slightly arched up in surprise. She slowly waved her hand as the floating card turned a bit toward Ethan. "He will be there," Gaia's words completely taken aback Noah and Rowena by surprise. They expected to negotiate or at least threaten her, but she glanced at Ethan for a moment and agreed to help them. "Thank you," Diana said as tears trickled down her eyes. "I hope for your sake you and your teacher don't play with your father's life." After Gaia spoke these words, her figure vanished into thin air. The card fell down to the ground as they all stared at the place where Gaia was for a few seconds without batting an eye. My lady, Gaia turned around to see Azazel. The demon butler was just as confused and surprised as Noah. "Forgive me for questioning you, my lady. But why did you agree to help them?" asked Azazel. "Did you see their faces? They are desperate." Gaia's face lit up. "Imagine the world knowing that Noah, the Supreme Guardian, needed the Dark Lord's help. People who support Noah would go nuts when they realize he struck a deal with the Dark Lord to save his father. Plus, when Sky Hall hears the Holy Maiden allowed the Dark Lord into her own home, we can expect some very big backslashes from her elders," Gaia devilishly chuckled. "Whoever tried to kill Ethan has done us a huge favor. Inform Nadia Hall about this. Tomorrow morning, I want to see the headline 'The Supreme Guardian struck a deal with the Dark Lord to save his family. He went for our weapons, and I am going straight for his credibility. I want to see that bastard's face when he realizes we completely fucked up his loyal base." Gaia couldn't keep her excitement bottled. If Azazel wasn't there, she would have bounced up and down, celebrating Noah's desperate situation. "Has he returned from his little trip?" Gaia asked Azazel. "Yes, my lady. He is currently meditating in the garden. I'll go meet him then," said Gaia. Eventually, Gaia reached the sword-hilt mountain top and saw Michael meditating with his eyes closed. Nightmare was peacefully sleeping behind him, cuddling Vidora. By the time Gaia reached Michael, the sky had rumbled in the distance as she sensed the upcoming heavy storm. Despite the weather, Michael remained calm and completely focused on keeping his mind empty. What surprised Gaia was the dark swords. They stood on each side like guards while radiating crimson-red lightning bolts. She could feel the electricity in the air around him. Human, Gaia called Michael in a husky voice as his eyelids moved slightly. It took Michael a few seconds to slowly open his eyes. "You are not gonna believe what just happened," said Gaia. Michael saw her eyes glowing with excitement and became curious. "Give me a second." Michael stood up as the dark slowly flew into his sheath. He then proceeded to brush off the dust from his black coat and adjusted his sleeves. "I just talked to Noah Winston." As soon as Gaia said these words, Michael was taken aback by surprise. His brows arched up. For a moment, his mind couldn't apprehend her words. Without keeping Michael in the dark, Gaia told him everything. Michael didn't even bat an eye hearing the story. Michael walked to the mountain's edge and glanced at the stormy dark ocean before him. "Ethan was one of the few people who helped us without an ulterior motive," Michael said, remembering all his conversations with Ethan. He couldn't help thinking of Diana either. For some reason, he felt a strange connection with Diana and Ethan. Besides, Rowena did save his life when the Blood Prince almost punched him to death. So he naturally felt indebted to Rowena, and he hated the feeling of being indebted to someone else. That was the reason why Michael always avoided taking loans from the system. Although Noah was his arch-nemesis, his conscience didn't allow him to ignore Noah's plea for help. Michael knew how hard it must have been for Noah to seek his help out of all people. Furthermore, Ethan and Diana always treated him well, like he was one of their own. Plus, this was a great opportunity to gain thousands of badass points as well as ruin Noah's image among the people. After taking a few long moments to gauge the plus and minuses of visiting Noah's home, Michael finally agreed to help him. "Nightmare." Michael looked over his shoulder and called out his dragon. Nightmare opened his eyes and slowly rose up to his feet without waking up Vidora. Since Nightmare was in his true form, he cast a large shadow on the ground, which trembled as he walked toward Michael. "We are going to Penn Town, buddy," Michael said, rubbing Nightmare's warm chin. "I am coming with you," Gaia firmly said. "Keep your eyes open when we reach there." "I have a feeling this assassination attempt has something more to it," said Michael. As much as Michael loved causing trouble for Noah, he didn't wish his parents to die. Michael would never wish someone to be an orphan as he knew what that life would be like. Part of him blamed Noah for failing to protect his parents and loving family. Every time one of Noah's family got themselves into trouble, he had to save them. If anything, Noah should feel grateful toward him. Meanwhile, Noah's team of elites rushed to his home as soon as they heard what just happened during the baby shower. The word of the assassination attempt on Ethan's life spread through the kingdom like wildfire. "Supreme Guardian." Neela entered the hall with the others. "We are already sweeping the kingdom as we speak for the assassin." "We will find him," said Neela. She clenched her fist, seeing all the blood on Noah's pure white robes and on the ground. Rowena completely ignored the guardians and sat beside Ethan, keeping the wound closed with the ice. Sabrina sat next to Rowena and held Ethan's hand as tight as she could. On the other hand, Diana remained without shedding a drop of tears. She firmly believed the Dark Lord could save Ethan's life. Diana's mind imagined new ways of killing the assassin and whoever sent him. After taking care of Ethan, tracking down the assassin would be her top priority. Even if the assassin ran to the edge of the world, she would find him and show him what would happen if someone dared to touch her family. "You guys secure the parameters and keep everyone away from Ghost." Neela and the others creased their brows as they couldn't believe what they had just heard. "Did you say Ghost, Supreme Guardian?" asked Neela. He is the only one who could lift the curse put on my father, said Noah. After Neela and the others heard Noah, their minds went blank. As a result, a complete silence swept across the hall until Neela opened her mouth. You cannot do this, Supreme Guardian. There must be another way, said Neela. What if this is all his plan? How can you know he wasn't the one who sent the assassin? Asked Neela. To their surprise, it was Diana who answered Neela, not Noah. He didn't, Diana simply said as everyone turned their gazes toward her. My lady Dash, Diana raised her hand, abruptly cutting Neela's words short. If he wanted Ethan dead, he would be 6 feet down on the ground by now, Diana said without bothering to hide her killing intent. The murderous rage in Diana's eyes startled Rowena as she had never seen her mother like that. Granted, Ethan was just stabbed, and her mother was not in her usual self, but still, the murderous aura Rowena felt around Diana completely surprised her. In Rowena's eyes, Diana seemed like a new person. Find the assassin and figure it out. If you find him first, he will be alive, Diana openly issued a threat, giving no shit about the Guardians. The one before them at that moment was not Diana but Harriet Hunt. Just a glimpse of her former self freaked the hell out everyone, including Noah and Rowena. I will face the consequences of my actions later. For now, this is my order. Go and secure the area and do not make any moves on the Dark Lord, Noah ordered his team.